Chapter 5:12. I did my best to hurry up and finally managed to finish writing before 12 o'clock. Gor Chapter 473. Ignorance is a kind of bliss. All this time, Shea had been feeling dissatisfied with his lack of offensive skills. There was nothing he could do about it. After all, that irresponsible old man had only taught him a bunch of nonsensical army of annihilation moves before he passed away. Sometimes, Shea could not help but think to himself, if that old man had been alive, he would have spent even 1% of the time he spent drinking and living a life of drunken stupor to teach him a few more moves. If so, his current combat skills would have been much more varied. Although the old man was not an expert, for him to be able to train up an apprentice like Hastings, he must also be proficient in various types of martial skills. Disregarding everything else, Shea knew nothing about Hastings' magnificent and powerful triangular spear technique. Now that he was holding the magic crystal that Hannigan had given him, he knew that it contained a set of unique skills that could be called the number one in the world. An impulse immediately welled up in his heart, and he couldn't wait to open it and take a good look. There was nothing he could do about it. His foundation was too weak. Although the old man had used the method of chopping firewood to help him lay down a deep foundation of comprehension in terms of combat skills, he was no match for even the most common of mid-level Byzantium warriors. Forget it. The only martial skills he could use right now were Dragon Thrust and Army of Annihilation. Crimson Killing Intent was not one of them. Crimson Killing Intent was more of a supportive skill to increase the power of the skill. Dragon Spike was used for one-on-one fights. Its power was indeed strong. However, the burden it placed on the body was too heavy. If Shea were to overuse it, the side effect could leave him half dead. In the face of an intense battle, this skill could not be used continuously. So most of the time, once Dragon Thorn is used, it can't knock down the opponent. Shea can only rely on his own instinctive strength and reaction to contend with the opponent. Simply put, it's a chaotic fight. Even though he had relied on his strong physique, strength, speed, and reaction time, he was still able to win. When he met an ordinary opponent, he would be able to deal with it. The method of beating his old master to death with random punches was also a tried and tested method. However, if he met a true expert, then he would only be caught unprepared. As for the Army Annihilation, it was a martial skill that should be used on the battlefield for group battles. Every move and every style was a big slash, striving to spread the power as far as possible, and the wider the area covered, the better. However, although this kind of martial technique was unparalleled on the battlefield, if it was used against an expert, it would be seeking trouble. In a fight between experts, every move had to be precise. Not a single weapon could be wasted, and the pursuit of technique was even higher. As for a martial technique like the Army of Destruction, every move was earth-shattering. In the eyes of a true expert, it was simply a waste of precious energy. However, other than these two sets of skills, Shea really did not have any other moves that he could use. When he had just started out, he had accepted an intermediate warrior like Alfracat as his subordinate and learned a set of swordsmanship from him. However, that set of swordsmanship was mainly illusory and was a standard assassin-type fighting style. After all, it was only an intermediate martial technique. As Shea's strength increased, that set of swordsmanship was no longer useful for Shea's current strength and opponents. Forcefully using such a low-level martial technique against a top opponent was simply asking for trouble. In fact, there were still many warriors under Shea's command. Whether it was Philip, who was once a silver warrior, or the group of mercenaries he later accepted in the Wildfire Plains, they were all experts in martial technique. However, the problem was that those guys' martial techniques were only around the intermediate level. It was really difficult for them to enter Shea's eyes. His path of cultivation was the path of martial arts. However, since his debut, he had never met a true top expert of martial arts to be his mentor. He had to rely on himself to explore and improve. It was really difficult for him. A good mentor was very important to the path of cultivation. Not to mention other things, Shea's strength had stagnated for a long time. It was only after adventuring with Hastings for a few days and receiving some brief guidance from Hastings that he immediately improved by leaps and bounds. It could be seen how important a true top expert's guidance was. Without a mentor, where could Lao Tzu learn his skills? Looking at the crystal in his hand, the country bumpkin's eyes were burning. He was drooling. However, Hannigan's words made Shea's heart turn cold. He did not have the guts to treat Emperor Odin's warning as a joke. This guy, if he really turned hostile, Master Shea would not be able to do anything about it. Shea's eyes glowed with a fiery light. He shook his head and sighed. Then, he put the crystal away. Next, he raised his eyelids and looked at Hannigan. All right, even though I know it is a cup of poisonous wine, Lao Tzu still swallowed it. I will accept this item. After I have mastered it, I will fight you again. A satisfied smile appeared on Hannigan's face. Then, he looked at the sky and sighed. All right, for your sake, I have wasted 10 days here. It is time for me to leave. I hope that the next time we meet, you will not fail to live up to my expectations. If I fail to live up to your expectations and fail to grow to the level that you had hoped for, then I will kill you. When Hannigan said this, he played it down. A useless opponent. There's no value in keeping him. Besides, I have 100 reasons to kill you. You do. Shea had to admit it. So, you are leaving? Are you going to the holy city of Babylon? Ha 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 ha. Not so fast, stupid kid. Hannigan smiled proudly. Holy Roland Garros is my biggest goal for this trip. However, before enjoying this feast, I must first taste some appetizers. Since I have already set foot on the continent, then I must defeat all the experts on the continent. Perhaps only a battle with a strong opponent can stimulate the growth of my mental state. Although it is hard to find such an opponent in the human world, I still remember that there are 1 or 2 people in the Byzantine Empire. They were already powerful a few decades ago, and they might have grown into masters by now. They are perfect for me to test out my sword. I will first travel around Byzantium. Perhaps I will also make a trip to your imperial capital Australia. It would be best if I can get rid of that hateful Emperor Garcia. Shea viciously thought in his heart. After I finish my travels in Byzantium, I will set off for the anarchic land. There are also powerful experts among the elves there. There are also giants and so on. They can all be my goals for this trial. As for the holy city of Babylon, it will be my last stop. Right now, I only hope that holy Roland Garros will not disappoint me. Shea suddenly felt a little worried about that holy Roland Garros that he had never seen before. After all, that expert was still a woman. As a woman, she was able to contend against a freak like Hannigan 30 years ago. If not for holy Roland Garros forcing Hannigan to a draw 30 years ago, this freak would have come out of seclusion and stirred up a storm of blood on the continent 30 years ago. Moreover, Shea was certain that Hannigan's state of mind 30 years ago was not as transcendent as it was now. 30 years ago, Hannigan was still a standard Emperor Odin. If he set foot on the continent with that identity, it would be a disaster for the Byzantine Empire. Then what should I say? I wish you a pleasant journey? Shea bitterly smiled. In his heart, he secretly thought, it would be best if he never came back. Hannigan left as soon as he said so, leaving Shea somewhat surprised. This number 1 person in the world turned his head and walked towards the entrance of the valley with large strides. After watching him walk away for more than 10 steps, Shea suddenly could not help but shout, "Wait a moment. What is it?" Shea hesitated for a moment before loudly saying, I have a question that I want to ask you." Hannigan's face showed some surprise. "It's like this." Shea stammered for a moment before bitterly smiling. My body had been smeared with dragon's blood. In the past, my body was very strong. Ordinary swords could not harm me. Dragon's blood does indeed have such a magical power. Hannigan nodded. However, a few days ago my body underwent some changes. My present strength has increased, but the effect of the dragon's blood on my body has disappeared. What is going on? Shea gave a wry smile. I do not have a good martial arts teacher, so I can only ask you for advice. Hannigan pondered for a moment before smiling. Are you very disappointed by this change? Naturally, Shea said. Who doesn't want to be invulnerable? I think this is a good thing. Hannigan shook his head. Remember my words. Power that is not yours in the end. Only the power that you have cultivated is something that truly belongs to you. Borrowing power from the outside world can give you a temporary advantage. However, in the long run, it will instead become your shackles. If you are too proud of the dragon's blood's ability to strengthen your body, you will gradually neglect the tempering of your body. That is not a good thing. After saying that, Hannigan continued walking. Shea remained where he was, thinking to himself. He felt that what this guy said did make some sense. He had always relied too much on external forces. Whether it was the fire fork, dragon's blood, dragon's scales, they were all borrowed power from the outside world. They were not the real power that he had cultivated. Seeing that Hannigan had already reached the mouth of the valley, Shea suddenly remembered something. He raised his voice and said, There is one more thing. I am going to marry your daughter. This time, Hannigan did not even turn his head. He just kept walking. A loud laugh came from afar. What does it have to do with me? Unexpectedly, he passed the test so easily. Even after Hannigan's shadow had disappeared, Shea was still standing in the same place for a long time without regaining his senses. This time, Shea came to meet His Majesty, the Divine Emperor Odin, with the mentality of putting his life on the line. However, he did not expect it to end like this. Although he was being raised like a piglet by the other party, waiting for him to fatten up so that he could slaughter him. However, at least that was a matter for the distant future. It was not something that he needed to worry about now, was it? Touching the many places on his body that were faintly painful, Shea gave a wry smile. It was really easy. He was sent flying by Hannigan in one move and was injured to the point of vomiting blood. Perhaps even a few of his bones were broken. This degree of injury was something that Shea had not suffered for a long time. Could this be called easy? Hannigan could leave as he wished, but Shea could not immediately go on his way. He rested in the same place for a long time. Then, when he had recovered 50 to 60% of his strength, he got up again and walked toward the old man's burial ground at the back of the valley. When he reached the grave, he found that there were traces of repairs on the grave. What was originally a somewhat dilapidated mound had been neatly stacked with stones to form a hill-shaped grave. The tombstone was no longer the broken wooden board that he had set up, but a stone tablet. The handwriting on it seemed to have been carved with fingers. Presumably, it was the work of Aunt Sophia or Merlin. However, in front of the grave, there was an empty wine barrel. Shea recalled that this wine barrel was exactly the same as the one beside Hannigan, who was sleeping in the ruins, when he had come here before. Clearly, Hannigan had also paid respects to his adoptive father here. Old man, I came here with the intention of risking my life, so I didn't bring you anything. Shea sat in front of the grave and wiped some of the dust on the tombstone with his hand. He smiled wryly and said, To tell you the truth, I'm beginning to wonder what kind of person you were back then. Even a guy like Hannigan respected you. As he spoke, Shea felt exhaustion all over his body. The pain from his injuries surged up again. His whole body was powerless. Gradually, he closed his eyes and fell asleep in front of the grave. For the white-clothed great wizard, the great Todoro, this day was undoubtedly the darkest and most tangled day of his life. Well, in fact, our poor lackey Todoro's life had long been filled with darkness and tangled. However, this time was different. He was accompanying his terrifying master to challenge an even more terrifying opponent. The most powerful person in the continent, the terrifying Emperor Odin. When he sent Shea out of the valley with the flying carpet, Todoro was very glad that Shea did not ask him to accompany him in. To challenge the Emperor Odin, was that not courting death? I, Sir Todoro, am living a comfortable life. Being respectfully addressed as the white-clothed great wizard by countless people and more was the most glorious and proud moment of his life. How could he bear to die? However, he also did not dare to leave. If he left his master here and turned around to run back, Todoro was certain that his terrifying master Merlin would turn him into a frog and skin him with his own hands. Therefore, Todoro stayed outside the valley and hid in a small forest. His heart was beating like a drum and his uneasiness had never stopped. This damned weather was so stuffy. It was so hot that Todoro was sweating all over. In fact, the weather was not hot. It was just that Todoro's heart was acting strangely. Without a doubt, Master Shea would definitely not be able to defeat the Emperor Odin. Almighty God above, it's not that I, Todoro, do not respect that terrifying Master Shea, it's just that the opponent is the Emperor Odin. In that case, after the legendary ferocious and cruel Emperor Odin kills my master, will he also treat my poor Sir Todoro as a side dish and destroy him? The more he thought about it, the more terrified he became. So scary, so scary. Todoro's imagination ran wild. He did not know how much time had passed. He only felt that his body was numb. He had been weighing a question in his heart. Should he stay here and wait for the Emperor Odin to finish killing Master Shea and come out to kill him? Or should he escape back to Moor County and be turned into a frog by Sir Merlin? It was a choice that made him despair. So scary, so scary. Todoro quietly wiped away his tears and snot. Then, when the sky turned dark, the magician's stomach failed to live up to his expectations and began to growl. He was hungry. Even if I die, I have to find something to eat first. I'll be a ghost who dies with a full stomach. As long as I don't die, I have to eat. Todoro thought with a guilty conscience. I'm not running away, I'm just leaving to find something to eat. This can't be considered abandoning my master and running away alone. There shouldn't be any crime. Just as the magician's heart was in a dilemma, a figure appeared at the entrance of the valley. It was slowly walking out of the mountain. Todoro's eyes were sharp. With just one glance, his body immediately turned cold. The person who walked out was clearly not his terrifying master Shea. The person who came was wearing somewhat sloppy clothes. It was clearly Odin's equipment. Even the height was typical of Odin's people. In this valley, other than the Emperor Odin, there was no other Odin's people. Thinking of this, Todoro only felt his legs go soft and his heart suddenly became empty. The last thought left in his mind was, the Emperor Odin has come out. He has come out. Then, Master Shea must have been killed by him. Master Shea is dead. Theodore's little life will be finished. Thinking of this, Todoro's heart suddenly filled with sorrow and he burst into tears. He knelt on the ground, crying with sincerity and desperation. It was tragic beyond compare. Poor little magician, why are you so sad? Just when Todoro was about to stop crying, a voice sounded above his head. Todoro raised his head and saw that the man Odin had unknowingly walked in front of him. He was standing in front of him and looking down at him. Because of the back of the light, the expression on his face could not be seen clearly. But his eyes, in the dusk of the evening, were frighteningly bright. Todoro just opened his mouth and suddenly realized the identity of the other party. The terrifying Emperor Odin. He was dead meat. He was dead meat. Todoro, a genius, will die here today. Sorcerer's heart was suddenly filled with grief and indignation. He raised his head, and with the courage he had never had in his decades of life, he looked straight at God Emperor Odin in front of him and said, "I'm sad for Master Shea. I, Todoro, am a loyal retainer of Master Shea. Loyalty is my life's motto. Courage is my epitaph. I am not afraid of death. I am not afraid of strong enemies. Even if you are the powerful Emperor Odin, even a lowly person like me dares to raise his noble head to you. Come and kill me. Even if I, Todoro, die with dignity." Hannigan was a little surprised. Even though he was the Emperor Odin and had lived a wonderful life, he had never met such a wonderful person like Todoro. When he saw this guy crying and looking at him, he was clearly scared to death. But in the blink of an eye, he changed into such a righteous person. You are Shea Thunder's retainer, his follower?" Hannigan smiled faintly and looked at the wretched magician in front of him, then shook his head. "Your strength is too weak. Your magic talent is as lowly as an apprentice magician's." But after looking at him for a while, Hannigan's eyes suddenly lit up as if he had seen something from Todoro's body. Life magic? Hannigan's face showed a trace of surprise. Daring to burn your own life in exchange for magic, a lowly magician like you has some courage. He seemed to be smiling very happily. "Since you are that stupid kid's loyal servant, then to reward your loyalty, consider this a little reward." After saying that, Hannigan casually threw something from his sleeve in front of the magician. That casual look was like throwing a copper coin to a beggar on the side of the road. Then, Hannigan left without looking back, quickly disappearing into the night. Theodore's mind went blank. Only after Hannigan's figure had completely disappeared did the Archmage abruptly let out a loud roar. He jumped up and patted himself from head to toe. "I'm alive! I'm actually alive! Ha 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 ha! Praise the Lord! Praise the great Lord! That cruel, vicious, and terrifying God Emperor Odin actually didn't kill me! No, 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 it must be the light of courage and noble loyalty of my Lord Theodore that made that God Emperor Odin feel ashamed of his inferiority and leave in shame. Ha 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 ha! It must be like this. It seems that my Lord Todoro is the real lucky star. Ha 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 ha!" Suddenly, Todoro, who was dancing around, accidentally stepped on something. His heart skipped a beat and he bent down to pick it up. It was the thing that Hannigan had casually thrown in front of him earlier. Holding it in his hands, Todoro's eyes suddenly widened. This was a magic badge. Moreover, it was a magic badge that symbolized power, authority, and supremacy. This magic badge wasn't made of gold or silver. It was made of mithril. God! A magic badge made of mithril! Todoro's hands trembled. In his memory, the Byzantine Empire was a kingdom of mages, and the only people who were qualified to use mithril to make badges were those who stood above the clouds, the noblest and the noblest grand mages. Strong, grand magi. Out of curiosity, Todoro could not help but use his weak and humble magic to test it out, carefully injecting it into the badge in his hands. Then, boom! With the injection of a trace of magic, the mithril magic badge in his hands suddenly shone with an unparalleled light. Todoro exclaimed as his whole body seemed to be penetrated by some kind of huge force. In his mind, it was as if a huge gate had opened, and a surging torrent poured fiercely into his mind from the outside. Countless unfathomable, unsophisticated, mysterious, fantastical, high-level, and top-notch magic spells turned into a vigorous tide and poured fiercely into Todoro's mind. This strong wave of consciousness immediately smashed poor Todoro until he saw stars. The last trace of consciousness was also washed away by this majestic wave of consciousness that poured in. With a thud, Todoro fell backward, rolled his eyes, and fell unconscious. Our poor Lord Todoro did not know that he had been hit by a meat pie. This mithril magic badge belonged to a powerhouse of the continent that Hannigan had defeated before coming out of seclusion. He was one of the powerhouses that had besieged the Odin Divine Emperor 30 years ago, a great magus. Hannigan defeated this grand magus, and this badge became his spoils of war. What Theodore didn't know was that this mithril badge contained the memories of that grand magus, who had spent his entire life researching magic immersion, as well as a large amount of powerful and profound advanced magic incantations. For a low-level magus like Todoro, the magic spells he had mastered were only 2 or 3 of the lowest-level magic spells. But the ones in his mind in this mithril were high-level magic spells that only a true high-level magus could master. Among them, there were even 2 incantations for forbidden spells with boundless power. More importantly, this mithril was the most expensive, precious, and rare magic material in the world. Its magic power storage capacity was thousands of times higher than ordinary magic power crystals. The magic storage capacity of 1 ounce of mithril was equivalent to 10 kilograms of the highest quality magic amethyst. And the weight of this badge was no less than 6 or 7 ounces. That grand magus defeated by Hannigan had the habit of storing the magic he cultivated from meditation in the mithril badge. A powerful grand magus would cultivate year after year and store the excess magic in this small mithril badge. Even if it was only a small amount at a time, the amount of magic stored in this badge, which was equivalent to 100 kilograms of amethyst, was astonishing. And all of this magic, along with the vast amount of magic knowledge and memories of magic spells, all rushed into Todoro's mind, and our lucky Lord Todoro, who was lying on the ground, had already blissfully fainted, and shamelessly drooled from the corner of his mouth. Ignorance is a blessing. To be honest, from the start of this book, among the supporting characters, my favorite is the white-clothed Grand Magus, Lord Todoro. Lord Todoro is mighty. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 513. GOR Chapter 474. A Crazy Plan. Master and servant, Shea and Todoro, one inside the valley while the other outside, slept for a long time. It was not until the dawn of the next day that Shea, who was inside the valley, suddenly woke up. He opened his eyes. Due to the injuries on his body and the combination of pain and exhaustion, he had fallen asleep before the old drunkard's grave for an entire night. When he woke up, he felt his whole body going numb. After stretching his neck and arms, he felt his body relaxing slightly. Truth be told, Shea's body was no longer strengthened by the dragon blood. However, he had gradually noticed something strange. His body's recovery rate had increased greatly compared to before. Even the minor injuries he had sustained were nearly twice as fast as before. This change could be considered a small comfort. After getting up from the grave, Shea sighed. To think that I would end up sleeping here for an entire night. He then turned to look at the old man's grave and smiled. Hey, old man. I spent another night with you. Sigh, I fear there won't be many opportunities like this in the future. If there is an opportunity, I will come visit you again. After saying that, Shea tidied up his clothes and turned to walk out of the valley. After sleeping for a night, although he was sleeping in the wilderness, his spirit was a lot more exuberant, and the injuries on his body were slightly better. Although walking was still somewhat painful, it was a lot easier than yesterday. After walking out of the valley, he looked around. Son of a bitch! That coward Todoro must have run away. It would be strange if Lao Tzu did not whip him when he returns. As he was looking around, he suddenly heard snoring sounds coming from the trees to his left. Shea's heart skipped a beat. Following the sound, he saw Todoro sprawled out beneath the trees. His body was in the shape of a big, and he was sleeping with his mouth wide open. His snores were thunderous, and there was even a snot bubble coming out from his nose. This guy was sleeping as soundly as he could possibly be. Shea could not help but feel amused. He stepped forward and gently kicked Todoro's leg. However, this fellow only mumbled a few words before turning over and continuing to sleep. Todoro was already in a deep sleep. He felt as though he was having countless strange dreams. Inside the door, it was as if he was standing in the clouds. In the air around him, there were countless glittering golden words that circled around him. However, they were all written in the magic language that was used exclusively by magicians. Most of the questions were about the mysteries of magic. Some were about the understanding of magic, and some were about the research of magic. What excited Todoro the most was the fact that there were also many magic incantations mixed within the questions. Magic incantations. Magic incantations were treasures to any magician. They would not be easily imparted to anyone. This was because every magician's research on magic incantations required a lifetime of research. The magic incantations that every magician grasped would more or less have some minute differences. Even if it was a difference of a single note or a single word, it would still require a lot of effort to research. Every magic incantation was a secret to a magician. It was also a magician's greatest wealth. Poor Todoro, as a low-level magician who graduated from the Magic Academy, had only grasped 2 or 3 of the lowest-level incantations taught in the Magic Academy. As for the slightly higher-level incantations, there was no one to teach him. Naturally, the Magic Academy would not teach these. No magician would be willing to easily share the magic incantations that they had researched with others. Although he had followed Merlin for a period of time, Merlin had seen that his talent was low and had no interest in teaching him any incantations. He had only treated him as a little servant who ran errands. However, in this strange dream, there were so many high-level magic incantations that it made Todoro cry tears of joy. The dream that he had dreamed of for so many years had appeared in front of him. There were middle-level incantations, high-level incantations, and even 1 or 2 that looked unfathomable. Could they be the legendary forbidden spells? Wah 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 wah! What a beautiful dream! Although it was a dream, he hoped that he would never wake up from this dream. Unfortunately, just as Todoro was crying in his dream, there was a crash. He only felt a sudden chill on his face, and his whole body suddenly shivered. The golden characters that were lingering around him suddenly disappeared. Todoro fiercely cried out and finally woke up from his dream. Wah! Todoro sat up straight. His eyes were wide open and he gasped for breath as he looked in front of him. Shea was standing in front of him, holding a leather bag in his hand and sprinkling water on Todoro's face. Todoro was immersed in the sea of magic when he was suddenly awakened. His heart was suddenly filled with endless anger. However, when he raised his head and saw Shea's faint smile, the anger immediately dissipated. The magician immediately put on a crying face and shouted "Wah!" He threw himself over and hugged Shea's thigh with both hands. He cried out in a mournful voice, "My master! My master! You are not dead. I have been waiting outside this valley, and there was not a moment when I was not worried about your safety. Praise the God, praise the great God, bless you to return safely. My master, you are blessed with great fortune. With the blessings of the gods, you can turn calamities into blessings and calamities into auspiciousness. What nonsense are you spouting?" Shea swung his leg and kicked away the crying fellow who was hugging his thigh. "Get up. Are you really worried about me? I see that you are sleeping soundly. Who said that? Who said that?" Todoro immediately put on a look of great grievance and humiliation. "Who am I, Todoro? Loyalty is my motto. Courage is my epitaph. My honorable master was fighting a strong enemy in the valley. How could I, the incarnation of loyalty, be sleeping? I was obviously meditating and praying with my eyes closed, praying to the gods to bless you, my master." "Ha ha! Was it meditating and praying?" Shea could not help but sigh at how thick-skinned this fellow was. Todoro smiled embarrassedly. Fortunately, Shea did not really care about this question. After all, Shea already knew what kind of virtue this loyal and brave servant of his was. Todoro quickly wiped away his tears and put on a look of joy. Honorable master, this time you have defeated that hateful and cruel Emperor Odin. We can return victorious, defeat him. Shea directly rolled his eyes. He really wanted to kick this thing in front of him to death. Even a thick-skinned person like Country Turtle could not help but blush. Thinking about how he was beaten up by Hannigan until he vomited blood and was finally raised like a piglet, he could not help but feel short of breath. However, Shea naturally would not mention this kind of shameful thing to Todoro. On the other hand, Todoro recalled how Emperor Odin walked out and left confidently yesterday. It did not look like he had been defeated by Shea. Looking at his master's tattered clothes and bloodstains at the corner of his mouth, it was clear that he had been beaten up very badly. However, the wise Sir Todoro naturally would not mention this in front of Shea, lest he look for trouble. Then, let's go home. Shea waved his hand. Todoro immediately took out the flying carpet from his sleeve and used magic to summon it. But at this time, something strange happened. Todoro finished chanting an incantation and felt the mana in his body suddenly become abundant. It was as if an electric current had passed through his body, causing him to shiver. With a whoosh, a demonic light flashed in front of his eyes, and he saw that the flying carpet was summoned and unfurled. However, both of them were dumbfounded by what they saw. Originally, this flying carpet was only about 2 meters long. With the physiques of Shea and Todoro, it was just right for the two of them to sit on it. But now, after Todoro finished chanting the incantation, he saw this flying carpet appear after the magic light in front of him. What the hell? Was this still a flying carpet? The flying carpet floating above their heads was 7 to 8 meters wide and more than 10 meters long. It was shining with a dazzling magic light. Todoro was also dumbfounded. He opened his mouth and muttered, This, what the hell, could this flying carpet evolve on its own? The two of them looked at each other for a moment, then Shea probed, This is your doing. Todoro was confused and subconsciously shook his head. But, this is clearly our flying carpet. I'll look at it. The last time I went out, I sat on it and ate a drumstick and accidentally got some oil stains on it. Shea blinked a few times. This thing has become so big. Can it still fly? Todoro swallowed his saliva and carefully started chanting the incantation. After a string of incantations such as, Almighty, Great Merlin, something even more amazing happened. The light on the flying carpet suddenly doubled. Before the two of them could react, they heard the sound of wind whistling past, and the flying carpet abruptly flew out on its own. In an instant it disappeared into the horizon, the two of them. After a while, Shea was the first to come back to his senses. Damn it! You should have waited for us to sit on it before chanting the incantation. The country bumpkin cursed angrily. Todoro, on the other hand, kept his mouth shut. His eyes were first filled with surprise, then panic, and finally, an abnormal light suddenly burst out. Todoro opened his eyes and looked at the sky, but the flying carpet had already flown to who knows where. There was no trace of it at all. The magician swallowed his saliva. Honorable master, I think something might have happened. Nonsense. Of course something happened. You lost Merlin's flying carpet. When we go back, she will definitely turn you into a frog. Shea sighed. Miraculously, even after hearing that he would be turned into a frog, the magician's face no longer showed fear like before. Instead, he looked at Shea with a dull expression. No, master, I mean, something happened. Maybe it has something to do with this. Todoro's expression was unsure whether to cry or laugh. It's like this, last night. After a while, Todoro stuttered and told Shea about how he met the Emperor Odin last night. Of course, Todoro would not say that he was so scared that he knelt on the ground and cried on the spot. In his narration, he described himself as a kind of person who was not afraid in the face of danger and was unyielding. In the face of the most powerful person in the world, he stood proudly and scolded him with awe-inspiring righteousness. He used his awe-inspiring righteousness to make the powerful person feel guilty and retreat in shame. When I shouted at him, "If you kill me, Todoro, there will be thousands of Todoros in this world who will rise up dauntlessly to resist your cruelty. Even if you can chop off my head, you can't chop off my awe-inspiring righteousness." Todoro's saliva flew everywhere as he spoke. Then, he deliberately sighed and pretended to be modest. The Emperor Odin was frightened by my words and turned pale with fright. He said, "I didn't expect that there would be such a hero in this world. If I had known that you existed in this world, I wouldn't have set foot on the mountain." After saying this, he held his head in shame and left. Before he left, he gave me something. Of course, I, Todoro, have such a noble character. How could I accept such a cruel person's gift? But when he saw that I didn't accept it, he didn't want to. He begged me to accept it and said that it was a waste to keep it in his hands. Only a hero like me could get it. In the end, I couldn't resist his enthusiasm and reluctantly accepted it. When Shea heard this, the muscles in the corner of his eyes twitched. He tried to restrain himself, but he couldn't bear it any more. Finally, he kicked Todoro's body and made this shameless guy tumble down. Then, he scolded, "Get to the point. What did he give you?" "It's this." Todoro took out the magic badge and said with a proud smile, "This is a magic badge belonging to a Grand Magus." After saying that, he gave a brief introduction of the magic of this mithril badge. After hearing that, Shea looked at Todoro in disbelief. "You mean to say, this badge might contain the knowledge and memories of a powerful Grand Magus? It might even contain a lot of magic power?" Todoro nodded his head. "Possessing this badge is a symbol of status. Respected master, from today onwards, please address me as Grand Magus Todoro." Shea took a deep breath and kicked out again, sending this Grand Magus Todoro flying into the grass. "We'll talk about this when we get back. It seems we can only find Merlin and ask him about it." Shea sighed. "Now that we don't have the flying carpet, we have to think of another way to get back to Denzel City." He could not help but mutter inwardly, "This Duoluo was truly a lucky bastard. If the magic of this badge is real, then this fellow has truly been hit by a meat pie that fell from the sky. Son of a bitch, the gods are truly blind. No, it should be said that my cheap father-in-law is the one who is blind." Todoro crawled up from the grass. At any rate, he had been staying by Shea's side all this time. He had long since gotten used to being beaten up by a country bumpkin. Receiving a few flying kicks was nothing out of the ordinary for him. At any rate, Shea had a sense of propriety in his attacks. He only wanted to teach this shameless fellow a lesson. Naturally, he would not use his full strength to kick him. "Then, master, this badge." As Todoro said those words, his eyes darted around and his voice became somewhat apprehensive. "Humph, are you still afraid that I will snatch away your good stuff? How could I, Shea, do such a thing? Snatch something from my own servant?" Shea glared at Todoro. "Of course, master, you have a noble character. You would never do such a despicable thing." Todoro immediately replied resolutely. However, he thought to himself, "Back then, I wonder who had even snatched away Lao Tzu's clothes." Of course, he could only keep these thoughts in his heart. Our brave, great wizard Todoro would never dare to say it out loud. Master and servant left the mountains and went all the way to Wildfire Town. They first went to One-Eye's Tavern to check it out, only to find that Aunt Sophia and her family had long since disappeared. The tavern was also closed for business. Shea had no choice but to buy 2 horses from the market with Todoro and ride to Denzel City. Along the way, Todoro was as excited as a child. His whole body was full of magic, and his mind was filled with countless magic spells. He was like a nouveau riche who was recklessly squandering his magic. Sitting on the back of his horse, Theodore's mouth kept chanting all kinds of incantations. Along the way, Theodore's body kept flashing with all kinds of multicolored magical radiances. Various transformations also appeared around him. For a moment, a gust of wind blew. For a moment, he shot out a pile of fireballs, burning the trees on the side of the road into black charcoal. For a moment, he cast petrification, turning a hare running by the roadside into a stone statue. The magician was having a lot of fun. Finally, after accidentally casting a berserk spell, the warhorse that was hit by the berserk spell suddenly went berserk. With a kick, the poor magician was directly thrown off the back of the horse. He crashed to the ground and fell half to death. Finally, the magician's excitement was slightly extinguished. Damn it, wait until this magician's strength is great. I'll subdue a dragon to be my mount. The poor magician stood on the ground and rubbed his sore butt, viciously swearing. Shea could not bear it any more. He kicked the guy over, then took out a rope to tie him up and stuffed his mouth. He threw him on the back of his horse and continued forward. Thus, the world was finally quiet. When the two of them returned to the garrison of Denzel City, Adeline and Merlin, who stayed at home, saw that Shea had returned and heaved a sigh of relief. On the other hand, when Aslan saw Shea's bruised and swollen face, a look of schadenfreude appeared on his face. However, Shea naturally would not pay attention to that old bastard. He directly searched Todoro's body for the badge and handed it to Merlin. Then, he recounted what had happened to Todoro. After that, he handed the Grand Magus, who was tied up like a mummy, to Merlin. After that, Shea simply washed his hands of it. Oh? The magic of a Grand Magus? It was taken over by this shameless kid? Merlin's eyes immediately lit up. Normally speaking, a magician's badge must have been left with his unique magic imprint. Only the magician himself can open it and use it. However, this badge had fallen into Hannigan's hands. With Hannigan's strength, he must have forcibly erased the magic seal on it. As a result, this thing like Todoro had taken advantage of it. However, this is a very interesting topic. If I directly infuse magic into a good-for-nothing, would I be able to become an expert magician? It's worth a try. Merlin seemed to have found an interesting toy. With one hand carrying Todoro, he quickly scuttled into his own courtyard. As for whether she would catch Todoro, steam him or fry him, or use various strange magic experiments on the pitiful Grand Magus, all of that had nothing to do with our master Shea. However, before Merlin entered the courtyard, he said, "Since you've met Adeline's father, then you can choose a date for your wedding. It's not good to drag it on day after day. Also, the dwarves outside the city have stayed here for too long. They're here to observe the ceremony. You should get married early and send these guests back early. Also, those elves come to me every day to ask for guidance on magic. Where would I have the time to give pointers to those good-for-nothings?" This woman was probably the only one who could call the elves, who were born with powerful magic talents, trash. Shea beamed with joy and hugged Adeline in his arms. With a wave of his hand, he said, "Mary, Mary, pass down the order, choose a date for the wedding. Lao Tzu is going to get married." After saying that, the country bumpkin who had been suppressing his anger for a long time carried Poor Thing into his own courtyard. However, Poor Thing struggled out of Shea's embrace. His beautiful little face was red as he anxiously said, You, since you're going to get married, you can't touch me. According to tradition, we can't see each other for a month before the wedding. Otherwise, it will bring misfortune." When Shea heard this, he said indifferently, "Lao Tzu's troubles are already too many to count. Things like misfortune, it doesn't matter if there's more or less. My poor little darling, come, let Big Brother take good care of you." Adeline's face was red, but she shrank her body to avoid the country bumpkin's evil claws. she begged. Shea, I'll be your wife in the end. You can't just let me be this time, okay? I want to be with you, well, forever. I don't want any misfortune, I beg you, okay? No matter how shameless Shea was, he could not do such a tasteless thing as forcing himself on his own woman. Besides, he loved Poor Thing very much. Seeing Poor Thing blushing and begging him, he could only nod helplessly. Therefore, our great country bumpkin had to continue to be a bachelor for a while before the wedding. General Shea Thunder's wedding immediately became the top priority of the entire newly established northern garrison. The news of the wedding spread, and everyone began to nervously prepare for it. In Shea's mind, it was just a wedding. He wanted to find a group of people to eat and drink happily, and then hold a ceremony. But he didn't expect that the group of people under him would firmly oppose it. The dignified Empire's new noble, the powerful northern garrison general, the Empire's duke, Sir Shea Laming's wedding, how could it be so hasty? This matter was not just a wedding, but also had important political significance. It must be done in a big way. Everyone started to get busy. Green rushed back to Denzel City from the new city. As for the remaining generals, those who could make it back, after receiving the news, all rushed to Denzel City. Even Sogol, who was far away in the Corsica region, left his army with his generals and returned with more than 10 carriages full of gifts. The wedding was quickly set for a date that was carefully selected a month later, and the news of Shea's wedding was quickly spread through various channels. Even the governor's wife in the Besta military district received the news and sent a delegation to Denzel City with a generous gift. Shea, the groom, suddenly became free. Naturally, a bunch of subordinates were busy preparing for the wedding. As for the garrison's logistics chief, Katua, he was elected as the chairman of the wedding preparation committee. What surprised Shea was that a few days after the news of the wedding spread, a group of 30 Odin's reindeer cavalry came from Notts County with a white flag and a large carriage full of gifts. They rushed to Denzel City. On the way, they were intercepted by Shea's cavalry scout. The other party directly told Shea the purpose of their visit. Under the orders of Grand General Hastings, they were here to deliver congratulatory gifts to General Shea Thunder's wedding. This strange action puzzled Shea's group. Hastings was General Odin, and they had just destroyed one of Odin's divisions. It was reasonable to say that they were enemies and not friends. After Hastings took over Notts County, he had been entrenched there and had no intention of expanding. Everyone had been living in harmony, but their relationship wasn't so good that they would come to deliver congratulatory gifts to Shea, right? Moreover, if the news of an enemy nation's Grand General delivering congratulatory gifts were to spread to the imperial capital and the Emperor found out, it would likely arouse suspicion and jealousy toward Shea. Green immediately ordered the cavalry along the way to strictly protect this diplomatic mission. No one was allowed to approach them. They were to be escorted to the barracks outside Denzel City. No one was to enter the city and see them. The group of Odin's reindeer cavalry sent by Hastings was his personal guard from the Black Flag Army. The leader was actually Hastings's personal guard captain, a valiant-looking and burly man from Odin. This diplomatic mission was escorted to the barracks outside Denzel City. At night, Hastings's personal guard captain entered the city under the strict protection of a group of guards and went to the barracks to see Shea. He even sent a letter in Hastings' own handwriting. The letter was very simple and the meaning was very clear. The letter was sealed with lacquer. It was obvious that no one had opened it along the way. Moreover, with Hastings's prestige among the Odin soldiers, no one dared to disobey his orders. The letter was delivered to Shea undamaged. There was only one sentence in the letter. I am heading east. Everything is peaceful. I am temporarily borrowing your territory. I will return it in March. Shea looked at the secret letter and pondered for a long time before sighing. The country bumpkin was moved. After all, they were from the same sect. At a critical moment, he really helped. Hastings occupied Notts County, which was east of Shaya's sphere of influence. The meaning of Hastings's letter was very clear. He had no intention of attacking Shaya from the west. Instead, he was preparing to expand to the east. It was fine as long as everyone lived in harmony. And obviously, Hastings also knew that Shaya had received the title of Duke of Notts County. The Notts County that he occupied had already become Shaya's noble fief. Hastings also straightforwardly expressed that he was temporarily borrowing Notts County and would return it in 3 months. However, there was a deeper meaning hidden in the letter. After Shaya understood it after thinking for a while, he couldn't help but take in a deep breath of cold air. He immediately opened a map of the Byzantine Empire to take a look. Notts County to the east? What did Hastings mean by expanding to the east? The map showed that the east of Notts County was the vast eastern territory of the Byzantine Empire. Most of the land had already been occupied by the warlords of the Tema military district. However, Shaya's eyes were fixed on a certain location on the map. The eastern land of the Byzantine Empire was about a few hundred miles away from Notts County. There was a large river in the east of the empire, the Great River of Gover. This was a long river that ran through the north and south of the Byzantine Empire. It had always been the main artery that connected the north and south of the empire. It was an important channel for the transfer of resources from the north to the south of the Byzantine Empire. And if Hastings went east and attacked this canal, if his Black Flag army seized the docks along the river and gathered warships, then followed the flow of the river south. Shaya's finger traced the direction of the river south on the map. At the southern end of this great canal was an inland river port city called Terry. It belonged to a small warlord of a small military district. The problem was the location of this place. It was only less than 300 miles away from the center of the empire, Osgiliath. If Hastings' army went down the river and landed here, they would occupy the docks and reorganize. With the Black Flag Army's marching speed, they would be able to reach Osgiliath in a few days. This Hastings. His goal wasn't to go east. It was Osgiliath. In this instant, Shaya suddenly remembered something Hastings had said before. I am a person without a country or family. Shaya could still clearly remember that when Hastings said those words, his expression was sorrowful. Within his tone, there was a faint resentment that even the ocean wouldn't be able to extinguish. Go down the river and attack Osgiliath. This crazy guy. Crazy! Shaya muttered to himself, but he couldn't help but admit that this plan had an extremely high chance of success. Although going south along the Great Canal was the territory of various military districts, but those military warlords all had the thought of protecting themselves. Who would dare to intercept Hastings along the way? Intercept the great martial god of Odin, Hastings, and his Black Flag army that could move unhindered under the heavens. Thinking back to the time when thousands of cavalry went south to rescue the emperor, the warlords along the way all closed their doors and didn't fight. They simply weren't willing to fight with him and let him pass through. Then if it was Hastings, those warlords probably wouldn't dare to stop him. Who would be willing to risk their lives against Hastings? Hastings's Black Flag army would probably follow the Great Canal and go south without any obstructions. Those warlords might even offer food and supplies along the way to send this killing god across the border. This was a very stupid move in terms of strategy, because for Hastings, even if he succeeded in attacking Osgiliath, with his lone army penetrating deep into the Byzantine Empire, there was simply no room for development. But Shaya was even more clear that Hastings didn't care at all. He didn't care about the big picture or strategy. He just wanted to attack Osgiliath. His goal was to exterminate the Byzantium imperial family and the Krenma family. 3 days in a row. 7,000, 7,000, 8,000. In 3 days, I've updated a total of 22,000 words. I'm still recovering. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are even more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 514. GOR Chapter 475. Chosen by troubled times. After correctly guessing Hastings's plan, Shea was stunned by this bold and arrogant plan. His expression was uncertain, and his eyes were cold and hot at the same time. He pointed at Australia's location on the map and tapped his finger lightly on the map. There was no doubt that Shea's mind was currently filled with complicated emotions. If it was under normal circumstances, if Hastings wanted to attack Australia, then so be it. If Hastings wanted to attack Australia, then so be it. His army would go down south and attack Australia. Even if blood flowed like a river, it would have nothing to do with Uncle Shea. At any rate, he had no loyalty to Emperor Garcia. He had never received a single copper coin from the imperial family. It would be best if Hastings went over and killed the little emperor. That would suit Uncle Shea's intentions. In fact, if Hastings ran out of provisions, Shea might even secretly send some men to support him. But the problem was, Australia did not only have that despicable little emperor there. Adrik, Ruhr, those good men in the army, they were all in Australia. Shea did not care about the little emperor's life or death. However, Shea could not give up on the others. Given General Adrik's unyielding character, if Hastings really did attack the imperial family, then Adrik would definitely fight to the death with Hastings, even if it meant mutual destruction. Shea had been to Australia before and had personally seen the current state of Australia. Having just gone through a war that nearly destroyed the country, Australia's foundation was still very weak. Adrik had done his best to devise a strategy. He had mobilized the second and third line local garrison forces from the southern regions of the empire that were still under the control of the imperial family. Using Australia's personal guards and veterans as the backbone, he had expanded the new army and reorganized the military in preparation for a counterattack against the rebel army. However, their foundation was still too weak. Due to the lack of provisions, they had to rely heavily on the assistance of Lantis men. As for the army, although it had recovered to tens of thousands of men, the soldiers from the second and third lines were much weaker compared to the personal guards and veterans who had experienced the war. Who was Hastings? He was not someone like Hughes or Salvatore, those good-for-nothings. That was right, good-for-nothings. When Shea later found out that the rebel army led by Hughes and Salvatore had broken into Australia and had been entrenched in the city for several days, it seemed that they had won 90% of the war. In the end, they had been chased out of the city with their tails between their legs. Shea could not imagine how those two idiots who had such a good grasp of the situation lost so miserably. What were they if not good-for-nothings? No wonder they could not succeed. However, Hastings was not that good-for-nothings. Who was Hastings? The war god of Odin, the #1 general of the Odin Empire. The two countries had been at war for many years. Who knew how many generals of the Byzantine Empire had been killed by Hastings? How many generals of the Byzantine Empire had died at the hands of Hastings? How many elite troops of the Byzantine Empire had died under that terrifying black flag? What about Adrik? Australia had turned the tide in the war and was now the #1 general of the empire. Don't forget that back then, Adrik had led the empire's most elite roadrear cavalry and was still unable to defeat Hastings. Moreover, the current army under Adrik's command was a mix of old and new troops. Their quality was far inferior to the roadrear cavalry. As for Hastings, he had led Odin's elite Black Flag army for many years. With Hastings's ability, he would definitely not make such a low-level mistake like Hughes and Salvatore. No matter how much Shea respected Adrik, he had to admit that under such circumstances, if the two of them were to fight, Adrik would definitely lose. If it was that fatso from Ruhr, even if he lost, he would just run away. That fatso did not seem to have much loyalty to the imperial family. However, Adrik was different. For someone like Adrik, if he could not protect Osgilla, he would rather die in battle. He had to do something. A trace of determination flashed through Shea's eyes. Although this was somewhat unfair to Hastings, Hastings could be considered as someone who had experienced danger together with him and had even saved his life. Moreover, Hastings had a blood feud with the Byzantium imperial family. Shea should not have stopped him. However, Adrik's life was more important. The most important thing for an army to raid a target over a long distance is to move quickly. Quick mobility to raid the target location and then launch a fierce attack at the fastest speed possible to defeat the enemy in the shortest amount of time. Because an army would be alone in a long-distance raid, it would not be good for a long battle. If the battle dragged on for too long, the morale would fall and the supply of the army would become a big problem. Thus, the most important word is quick. Other than that, there is nothing else. Shea muttered to himself in a low voice. As long as he could think of a way to warn Adrik, have him pay attention to the direction of the canal to the north, dispatch a group of troops to patrol the river and warn him at any time. At the same time, strengthen Osgilla's defenses, so that Hastings's attack would lose its suddenness. With General Adrik's military strategy and ability, he had a majestic city and several tens of thousands of troops. If he was prepared, defending the city shouldn't be a problem. As long as he could defend for a period of time and prevent the city from being breached, Hastings's Black Flag army would not be able to hold on and could only retreat. Giving Adrik a warning, this matter was easy to say, but difficult to do. It was definitely impossible for him to free himself and go to Osgilla. As the commander of an army, he couldn't leave. Although the wedding could be delayed, the restructuring of the army couldn't be delayed. There was also the matter of the enfeoffment of land. He had to be in charge of it as the head of the family. In that case, sending someone to deliver a letter to Adrik this matter couldn't be written in a letter. It definitely couldn't be written in black and white. After all, if he wanted to make Adrik vigilant, he had to let him know that he had dealings with Hastings. His relationship with Hastings definitely couldn't be written on paper. If by any chance there was a mishap on the way to deliver the letter, if that letter was lost and fell into other people's hands and spread out, he was afraid that his crime of colluding with a foreign country would be confirmed. At that time, no matter how he explained, it would be useless. Perhaps even his own army would be shaken. Thus, he could only send someone to deliver the message. However, this candidate made Shea scratch his head. First of all, this person had to be absolutely loyal to him. Take note. It was personal loyalty to him. It wasn't loyalty to the empire or the imperial family. After all, the person he sent to deliver the message would also know that he was in contact with Hastings. If the person he sent to deliver the message was loyal to the empire and reported to the imperial family, then he would be in a passive position. Next, this person had to have a bit of ability. The journey from Denzel City to Osgilla was a long one. Along the way, he would have to pass through many rebel army territories. If he didn't have a bit of ability, he would likely die along the way. He had a lot of brave warriors under his command. There were also those who were courageous and trustworthy. However, the loyalty of most of them was built upon the empire and the imperial family. Even Green was no exception. This letter from Hastings was a secret letter. Only Shea saw it. Shea was certain that if this letter was seen by Green, if Green knew of Hastings' intention to attack Osgilla, he would definitely urge Shea to immediately send his army east to attack Hastings. He would use this method to stop Hastings from moving southward. Even if his northern army might not be a match for Hastings's Black Flag army. However, Green would still insist on doing so. That was because many of Shea's subordinates were like Green. Their first loyalty was to the empire and the imperial family. Their second loyalty was to him, Shea Thunder. After thinking about it, he decided that he could no longer choose from the army. Then, the trusted subordinates that he had personally cultivated, those mercenaries that he had recruited from the wildfire plains, were not Byzantium people. Their loyalty was only to him. However, those mercenaries were all courageous and reckless. They were lacking in meticulousness. Of the two mercenary leaders that he had recruited, the younger Hawk was a hothead. He was brave and courageous. His strength was not ordinary. However, he was a fierce general-type character similar to Sharba. The older Russell was more cautious in handling matters. However, he was not astute enough. Furthermore, Russell's strength was not too good. If there was a mishap during the long journey to Osgilla, it would likely affect his plans. After thinking about it, Shea felt helpless and thought of the most suitable candidate. Shea immediately jumped up. First, he tore Hastings' secret letter to shreds. Then, he burned it. Then, he shouted, "Men!" Immediately, a servant came in from outside. Shea had already walked out the door. Has the door to the backyard been opened? Does Sir Merlin still not allow anyone to disturb him? The servant smiled bitterly and said in a low voice, "The door to the backyard has been closed. It has not been opened. Sir Merlin even left a sign at the door saying that those who enter will die. None of us dare to go near it." Shea sighed. He did not have any thoughts about Sir Merlin. The most suitable candidate in his heart was that person, Grand Magus Todoro. Although Todoro's conduct was somewhat wretched, his loyalty to him was not bad. Furthermore, his loyalty was to him and not to the imperial family. In addition, he was also a magician. Even in the midst of war, the local warlords would not dare to casually provoke a magician who was crossing the border. "He hasn't come out yet." Shea frowned. But then, his brows relaxed. No matter, Hastings' letter said, "Temporarily borrowed territory, return in 3 months." Then, it could be calculated that even if Hastings were to send troops, it would not be now. He would have to wait for 3 months. 3 months. After 3 months, it would be the rainy season every summer. The river would rise and the water would be abundant. Only then would it be easy to take a boat down south. Now, the dry season had not passed. Even if Hastings wanted to send troops, it would be impossible. There was still time. Thinking of this, Shea felt relieved. Since he had made a decision, he pulled the servant over and said seriously, "I have something to tell you. From now on, find a few people and bring a chair to sit outside the backyard. A few people will take turns and keep watch outside the door day and night. Once the door to the backyard opens, immediately send someone to inform me. I am going to stay in the military camp outside the city for a few days. Remember this and do not delay." After arriving at the military camp outside the city, Shea temporarily set up his office here. At the moment, there was a group of people in the city helping him prepare for the wedding. However, there were more important matters that Shea could not delay. During the past few days, the new city had transported a large amount of spoils of war that Shea had brought back from the imperial capital to Denzel City. Even the maids sent by the various noble families were brought to Denzel City in group. The matter of rewarding the soldiers based on their contributions was being carried out in an orderly manner. Green's idea was to hold the reward ceremony together with Shea's wedding. This would also serve as an opportunity to reward the soldiers and show the importance that the commander placed on the soldiers. The local officials of Ilton County had made a preliminary calculation of a batch of unclaimed land. After a rigorous examination, it was determined that the original owner of the land had died in the chaos of war. The unclaimed land had been taken over by Shea and given to the northern garrison region. After that, they would register the land and distribute it to the soldiers who had rendered meritorious service and to the families of the soldiers who had died in the war. In addition, some of the soldiers who had been injured in the war and retired would also be given land. The issue of land distribution received enthusiastic support from the soldiers, especially the soldiers at the grassroots level. In addition, Shea had brought back over 1,000 young maids. These young maids were gifted by the various noble families and were temporarily placed in the military camp outside the city. No one was allowed to disturb them. Denzel City was a small city with a small population. Shea had raised an army of 20,000 to 30,000 soldiers, causing the ratio of men to women to be greatly imbalanced. The 20,000 to 30,000 men had become single men. Even though there were still some prostitutes in Denzel City, their business was so good that it made one's hair stand on end. Shea issued an order. These thousands of young maids would be distributed to the soldiers as wives and concubines. Priority would be given to the soldiers who had been injured and retired. This decision puzzled Green. In Old Mad Dog's opinion, priority should be given to the soldiers who had rendered meritorious service. However, Shea's action quickly received the support of the entire army. Even the soldiers who had rendered meritorious service expressed their support. His lordship is willing to take care of the soldiers who have been injured and retired. From this, it can be seen that his lordship will care even more for us who are still serving the army. The cheers from below caused Green to be unable to stop himself from expressing his appreciation for Shea's decision. The only problem was Shea's order. Those women were not to be forced into marriage. They had to be willing to do so. In the beginning, Shea was worried that those young maids would not be willing to marry the disabled soldiers. However, Shea soon found that his worries were in vain. Most of the young maids were inclined to marry the retired soldiers. Some of them even rejected the advances of the officers who had rendered meritorious service and chose to marry the disabled soldiers instead. This question had troubled Shea for a long time. In the end, it was Dora who explained to him the subtleties of this matter. For you humans, the present is a time of chaos. In this time of chaos, serving the army is the most dangerous profession. Don't look at the soldiers who have rendered meritorious service. Who knows if there will be a day when swords have no eyes on the battlefield and they will unfortunately die in battle. On the contrary, those who have been injured and retired, although they have some disabilities, have been given land to support them. Plus, they will have no problems living in the future. More importantly, these retired soldiers no longer need to go to the battlefield. Although they have some disabilities, at least they won't be in danger of losing their lives. In this time of chaos, those young maids would rather choose a stable life. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 515. GOR Chapter 476. What a scam. There were a lot of military affairs piled up in the barracks outside the city that needed to be dealt with. This made Shea speechless. All the guys under his command had joined that wedding preparation committee. Shea really doubted whether those guys were deliberately using this excuse to slack off. Inside the military camp, Chen Xiaoyan checked the map of the recently acquired lands and the list of the lands that had been given out. After that, he signed some documents regarding the land statistics sent over by the local officials of Ilton County. The work on the documents left Shea feeling helpless. He was simply not good at these things. Rather, he disliked them. After reading through them for a long time, Shea suddenly slapped his head. He was not good at these things, but he had someone who was good at them. He quickly summoned his bodyguard captain over and sent someone to invite Sophie over. Sophie had also arrived in Denzel City with the brigade and was temporarily staying in the city. Her place of residence was very close to Empress Daphne's residence. It was said that after arriving in Denzel City, Sophie had privately gone to visit the Empress. After all, she was Cavashir's disciple. It was likely that she knew Daphne. Sophie was quickly invited over by the bodyguard captain. When she arrived at the military camp, the young woman's sleeves were rolled up and there was some sweat on her forehead. Her face and hair were stained with some white powder. It appeared to be flour. "What is it, General?" There was an indifferent look on Sophie's face. "I am preparing dinner at home." "Dinner?" Shea was puzzled. "Yes, I am preparing to bake my own bread," Sophie replied coolly. Shea was quick to realize that he had overlooked something. After Sophie had followed him to Denzel City, he had not had much time to settle her down. She was living alone, and even her servants were lacking. It was likely that she had been preparing her own meals every day. "From today onwards, I will assign 2 maids from my residence to take care of Sophie. Also, assign a small team of bodyguards to protect Sophie and listen to her orders. From now on, she will be my chief of staff." Shea reiterated the title of chief of staff, but in fact, even he himself was a little embarrassed. Because this so-called chief of staff was a general without an army. Sophie didn't comment on Shea's arrangement, but Shea looked a little embarrassed. "From today onwards, your daily life will be taken care of. As my chief of staff, you have the right to read these documents and help me deal with them. I give you the right to make decisions. You just need to report to me every day. Also to your reward." Shea thought for a moment. "Do you have any requests?" "I'm a single girl. It's useless for me to have so much money. I don't like living in the barracks. I want to live in the city. You have to give me a horse carriage. It has to be big enough to transport me to and from the barracks outside the city every day. I also need a warrant from you so that I can enter and leave the city at will, regardless of day or night. Also, Shea, I need a promise from you." "Promise?" Shea looked at the girl in front of him doubtfully. Sophie sighed. "Since ancient times, good advice has been unpleasant to the ear. You have to promise me that no matter how dissatisfied I am with you in the future, even if it makes you furious and makes you hate me, you must never kill me because of my words." Shea smiled. He felt that this request was ridiculous. "Do you think I'm that kind of person?" "Not now. In the future, it's hard to say." Sophie's tone was very serious. Anyone, after sitting in a high position for a long time, their mentality will change. Since ancient times, emperors have killed many loyal officials. They are not necessarily muddle-headed emperors. Wise emperors can also kill because of dissatisfaction. Shea couldn't help but protest. "Hey, I'm not an emperor." Sophie had already excused herself. She walked to the door and smiled gently. "We'll see." After directly appointing the chief of staff, Shea threw all the documents to the young girl. He did not feel that he was being irresponsible at all. After all, it was Sophie's idea to use land as a substitute for rewards. It could not be better for her to execute it. After getting rid of the biggest burden, the general shamelessly came up with a bad idea. "It's been a long time since I've visited our dear dwarven brothers. I have to go visit them." The dear dwarven brothers that Shea spoke of had been living outside Denzel City for several months. The 400 dwarves who came to send gifts last time were arranged to live in a separate military camp outside the city. Shea had not been able to officially accept the gifts sent by these dwarves. Furthermore, the dwarves were very stubborn and insisted on seeing Merlin in person. The leader of these 400 dwarves, the guy called Rock, had inherited the proud tradition of the dwarves' stubbornness. In his words, "Our dwarf, the Greybeard King, ordered me to come and celebrate the general's wedding, so we can't go back until the general's wedding is over." Therefore, the 400 dwarves had no qualms about freeloading here. It had to be said that although the relationship between the dwarves and humans was not harmonious, the dwarves liked human food very much. Compared to the dwarves, human food was more exquisite and delicious. Soft bread and meat with various sauces were all things that the dwarves could not make. This was truly a miraculous thing. The dwarves were good at metal smelting technology. They could make the best weapons and equipment and could identify the quality of various iron ores at a glance. However, they could not tell the difference between sweet ketchup and honey sauce. Although Shea had experienced war here and the food was not rich and even a little crude, it was already delicious for the dwarf. Besides, staying here as guests at Shea's place meant that they did not have to work every day and people sent them exquisite food to enjoy. The 400 dwarves were not in a hurry to go home. There were even some dwarves who wished that the general would never get married and just drag it on for 8 or 10 years. Anyway, the dwarves' lifespan was much longer than that of humans. An ordinary dwarf could live for more than 200 years. They had plenty of time to squander. When Shea came to the dwarves' residence, the dwarves had just eaten. These dwarves had to eat 5 meals a day: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dinner. It was probably to supplement the consumption of their strong and majestic bodies. Shea's arrival was welcomed by the dwarves. At least the guy called Rock, after freeloading for several months, finally gave Shea some face. "Respected General, welcome. We're just about to eat. Would you like to join us?" Rock seemed to be very enthusiastic, but Shea secretly curled his lips. Damn, this is Lao Tzu's food. Using it to invite Lao Tzu to eat, this favor is really cheap. However, he also squeezed out a warm smile on his face. No, 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 I've already eaten. Please enjoy. I just came to see my dwarven brothers on the way. Because of the delay of my wedding, you have delayed too much time here. It really makes me, the host, a little embarrassed. Rock had already wiped his mouth and laughed loudly. You're welcome, respected General. You are the most hospitable host. We have had a good time here. Lao Tzu was not happy at all. The food of 400 dwarves was equivalent to that of 2,000 people. I came here today because I have something to discuss with you. Shea smiled without batting an eyelid. Rock had brought a cup of hot water from who knows where and placed it in front of Shea. Then he sat opposite Shea, took out a bone comb from his arms, and carefully combed his long beard. He combed it very carefully and seriously. This also made Shea feel very strange. These dwarves could go 10 days without bathing, but every day they would spend at least 2 hours combing their beard. The dwarves cherished their beards so much that other races couldn't imagine. If you wanted to anger a dwarf, the best way was to show contempt for his beard. Then the other party would definitely fly into a rage. His beard was long enough to reach his toes when he stood up. His long beard was combed into 2 beautiful knots, and there were some small braids at the side. This guy patiently combed the numbers one by one. Listening to Shea's words, this seemingly simple and honest dwarf revealed a cunning look that did not match his appearance. Respected sir, you are a hospitable host. The dwarves are willing to be your friends. But I have to say that when we came, the great Greybeard King only gave us the task of delivering gift. Forgive us for not being able to help with other things. If you want to make weapons for your army, I'm sorry, but before we get the order from Greybeard King, we can't contribute our craftsmanship to any other race. Damn it. Shea cursed in his heart. If you don't make weapons for me, why does Lao Tzu keep you guys? If the dwarves can't make weapons, what value do they have? Shea didn't expect that one sentence would block the other party. He was somewhat unwilling, but anyway, you guys are idle here. I just need to make some weapons to arm my personal guards. I can only say that I'm sorry. Rock shook his head. We can't make weapons for your army. But we dwarves have other skills. We are good at digging holes. If you want to do any project, we are willing to contribute some strength to you. Digging the earth? Shea sweated a bit, thinking, why does Lao Tzu want you to dig the earth? Dig a big hole to bury you all? Shea was a little disappointed, and his expression couldn't help but become ugly. After all, Rock was still a simple and honest dwarf. He hesitated and whispered, although Greybeard King ordered that we are not allowed to make weapons for the human army. But you are our friend, and although we can't make weapons for your army, but as friends, dwarves can make 1 or 2 things for friends in private, which is still in line with our tradition. Oh! Shea's eyes lit up, but immediately dimmed. Can it only be forged for me? Yes, dwarves can only make things for their true friends, Rock said firmly. Shea stood up and walked back and forth. Suddenly, he slapped his thigh and smiled. Good. Then it's settled. I'll ask you to help me make some equipment for my personal use. This request isn't too much, right? Of course, we can do it at any time. Shea laughed and then said loudly, Good, I need 10 sets of heavy cavalry armor, 10 sets of heavy warrior armor, 10 sets of light armor. Wait! 10 sets? Rock hurriedly called out to Shea, You didn't misunderstand me, did you? I said I can only give it to you. It's for me alone. Shea said sternly, You may not know, but I'm already a noble of the Byzantine Empire. Duke, do you understand? In the ranks of the nobles of the empire, apart from the emperor and the prince, the duke is the noblest. For a noble like me, a duke's equipment must be in many different sets. As nobles with upbringing, status, self-restraint, and tradition, we have to change our equipment every time we wear them. We wear one set on the 1st of every month and another on the 2nd. The 3rd is the day to worship the gods, so we must change to a white set. The 4th is the day to worship the ancestors, so we must wear black. The 5th is the day I receive my subordinates and retainers, so we must wear red. The 6th is the day to worship the gods. Wait! You just said that you have already worshipped the gods once. Rock protested loudly. I believe in 2 religions at the same time. Us humans are a civilized country. Our laws give us the right to enjoy freedom of religion. Rock felt that his pitiful brain was not enough to understand. As a traditional dwarf, he did not understand humans. He had never interacted with humans before, and had never traveled to the human world. The dwarf groaned, God, believe in 2 religions? Believe in 2 different gods at the same time? How can that be? You humans actually have this kind of law? But what if there is a conflict between your 2 religions? Shea smiled strangely. Don't you know that we humans have something called a parliament? If there is a disagreement, everyone can have a good quarrel in the parliament and convince the other side. Inconceivable! Inconceivable! Rock cried out again and again. Where were we? In addition to armor, I need 10 sets of spears, 10 sets of sabers, 10 sets of 2-handed swords, 10 sets of hammers, 10 sets of shields, 10 sets of shields. Seeing that Rock was about to protest, Shea said loudly with a straight face, I am a noble. In the Empire, only the Emperor and the Prince are higher than me. With my noble status, do you really think that I would be like a beggar and only use one weapon? Us nobles have a habit of throwing away everything after a few uses. This is too wasteful. Rock's eyes widened. This is the tradition of us nobles. Please respect the tradition of us nobles. Shea said firmly. Really, things can be thrown away after a few uses? Too wasteful, too wasteful. Shea shook his head. The life of a noble is like this. Things that are thrown away anyway. Rocky's eyes suddenly turned and sized Shea up. Then, I have seen you twice. The last time you were wearing this robe, it is exactly the same. Do you want to throw it away? Of course. Shea forced a smile and nodded. Since you want to throw it away, why don't you give it to me? This robe feels like the precious silk of humans. Rock couldn't help but rub his dirty hands on the corner of Shea's robe. Here you go. Shea braced himself and took off the precious silk robe and threw it to Rock. Rock beamed with joy and looked at the belt on Shea's waist. Oh, this belt, is it made of lion's skin? I have seen you wear it a few times. Here you go. Shea directly took it off. And the ring on your finger, it seems to be made of high-quality crystal. Shea quickly took it off and threw it over. And, seeing that this hateful dwarf was going to continue, Shea quickly stopped him. If you continue, I will go out naked. Rock stopped and held Shea's top-quality silk robe, the top-quality lion's skin belt, and the precious crystal ring, beaming with joy. As you can see, These are our traditions. Shea sighed. Now, my dear dwarf brother, can you promise to make me some personal equipment? Rock's answer made Shea spit out blood on the spot. This seemingly simple and honest person had an honest smile on his face. He slowly but firmly shook his head and said, Sir, perhaps I am not smart, but I am not a fool. Damn. I was played by this honest man. Shea choked and angrily left. He rushed back home and didn't even have time to put on his clothes as he went straight to the backyard. The people he had arranged in the backyard were still there. Shea loudly asked, Did Merlin come out? No. The servant cautiously answered. Shea directly rushed to the door and loudly shouted, Hey! Your son was bullied. Are you coming out or not? After a moment, Merlin's impatient voice came from inside. What's wrong? The dwarf bullied me. He didn't admit what he promised me. Shea naturally refused to say that he had been cheated by the honest dwarf. Merlin's voice came from inside again. The dwarf bullied you? How can they have the courage? Anyway, it's like this. Can you help me? After a while, Merlin's voice finally came from inside. You go and tell the dwarf that if they dare to mess with you, I will go and turn Greybeard into a frog for another year. Shea immediately smiled. But then, Wait. Merlin said again, to turn Greybeard into a frog. Why did he say again? Could it be that she had, however, there was no need to think about these things carefully. Shea heroically rushed back to the dwarf's encampment outside the city. This time, he didn't bother to pretend to be a hospitable host and directly brought Rock in front of him. Merlin said that if you can't satisfy me, your Greybeard king will turn into a frog again. You choose for yourself. The wrinkles on Rock's face immediately tangled into a ball. After a long time, he gave Shea a deep look. You hate me? Well, you go and make a list. Shea, who had left the dwarf's encampment, suddenly had a feeling of realization. Damn, no wonder so many people envied the second generation of officials and gambled on the rich second generation. Having a valiant mother was really cool. Humph, didn't Rock want a list? Someone come. Go and bring me the equipment update booklet drafted by our Army's logistics department this year. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 5:16. When Shea once again visited the dwarves' encampment, he threw a thick pile of military equipment list drawn up by the logistics department to Rock. The dwarf warrior glanced at it and almost sat down on the ground. Almighty Thunder God! Rock sucked in a breath of cold air and shook his huge head with all his might. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. He stared at Shea and protested loudly. Respected General, if you want to make everything on this list, my brothers and I will have to stay here for at least a year or two. How can that be? There are 400 of you. Shea giggled. 400 dwarven craftsmen working hard to make these things for me. How can it take that long? Humph. We dwarves have our own pride. The things we make must be of the highest quality. If you only need the common goods, then the pride of the dwarves will not allow us to make those things. Rock's expression was very firm, asking for a sky-high price and paying the price as low as possible. This was Shea's usual trick. Looking at Rock's angry appearance, he laughed and casually took back the list, and then replaced it with a much thinner list booklet. Then, what about this number? That's also impossible. After taking a look, Rock said with a serious expression, in order to create a piece of high-quality equipment, you need top-quality materials. In my opinion, respected General, even if you are a duke, you shouldn't have that many top-quality materials in your hands. Shea mischievously smiled and once again took back the second list. As if performing a magic trick, he took out a piece of paper from his bosom and said with a smile, Then, this list should be fine. I have prepared enough materials. After looking at it, Rock was finally speechless. This was a list of several hundred sets of cavalry equipment, including armor, cavalry spears, cavalry sabers, cavalry shields, and horse armor. Shea's goal was very clear. He wanted the dwarves to create a set of elite equipment for his trump card, the mighty cavalry battalion. This would make his trump card army even more powerful. Just think about it, with the invincible offensive power of the mighty cavalry battalion and the elite equipment created by the dwarves, which army on the continent could stop them in a field battle? There was a pained expression on Rock's face. After hesitating for a while, he accepted the list. Shea immediately beamed with joy and waved his hand. "Bring in all the things outside." A large group of carriages was already waiting outside the dwarven encampment. Tens of large carriages carried the iron and equipment stored by the logistics department of Denzel City over. Additionally, Shea had also ordered the logistics department to organize tens of blacksmiths to assist the dwarves. On the surface, they are just assistants, but in fact, Shea had already secretly instructed them to pay attention to secretly learn from him and learn as much as they can. In addition, Rock also took the initiative to ask Shea to send some manpower to help them. After all, smelting metal and forging equipment required a lot of manpower. For example, if the dwarven craftsmen were to do things like burning charcoal, it would be a waste of time. Shea very generously transferred 2 battalions of auxiliary soldiers from the logistics department to help the dwarf. In the end, he brought Rock into the tent, and then his personal soldiers came in with a few boxes. "I need to create a real weapon." Shea's expression was very serious. "This is not an ordinary item. I need something really good. You organize your men and choose the best craftsmen among the dwarves to help me create this thing. During the process, no matter what you ask for, I will do my best to satisfy it." After saying that, Shea kicked open the lid of the box. Rock took a look. With just one look, the dwarf warrior fiercely sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes were bigger than a cow's and his beard was trembling. "Oh great thunder god! Dragon scale! It's actually dragon scale!" Rock's voice was trembling, and his voice was a little hoarse because he was too excited. "Well, good eyesight, it is indeed dragon scale." Shea looked at Rock's frightened expression and was somewhat proud. In addition to dragon scale, there are also some dragon bones and dragon tendons. Look, the materials are very complete. Shea sighed. "I need a set of dragon attribute equipment, do you understand?" Rock had already rushed to the top of the box. Like a drunkard who had seen good wine, his hands stroked back and forth on the dragon scale, back and forth, gently as if he was caressing his lover. Even his eyes showed an intoxicated look. "Heavens, this is the scale of an adult dragon." Rock muttered to himself. The great Greybeard King had a dragon scale shield. That was a treasure passed down from his grandfather's 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 grandfather. But even that dragon scale shield was only made from the scales of a young dragon. Heavens, thunder god bless me, I'm actually lucky enough to see so many superior dragon scales. Wu Ran turned his head. "Respected General, did you dig up a dragon's grave? Or did you stumble upon the cave of a dead dragon?" "Damn, Lao Tzu is a grave robber." Shea had a very disdainful look. "I killed a dragon with my own hands. What you see are all this general's spoils of war." Shea shamelessly boasted, completely ignoring Dora's disdainful sneer in his mind. "Dragon Slayer?" When Rockman looked at Shea again, his eyes were clearly filled with shock and fear. All along, dwarves had looked down on humans. Dwarven warriors were born with divine strength. Because of their race, they had outstanding talent for strength. Even the women and children of dwarves were much stronger than an adult human. And the elite warriors among the dwarves had innate divine strength, which was something that human warriors simply couldn't compare with. To dwarves, humans represented weakness. This view was similar to how humans looked at goblins. Up until now, although Rock had been polite to this General Shea in front of him, after all, he was freeloading in his home. He didn't have much respect for him in the end. It was purely because of the other side's identity as the son of that frightening great mage Merlin that he maintained a bit of respect. But if this identity was added with the aura of a dragon slayer, it would be completely different. It didn't matter what race, era, or culture it was. Being able to defeat a powerful dragon and kill it with one's own power was considered a great and awe-inspiring feat. A warrior that could defeat a dragon, regardless of race, had to be respected. Rock's performance immediately became a lot more polite. He looked at Shea with some fear in his eyes. This honest dwarf was apprehensive, wondering if he had been too lacking in respect for this dragon slayer. Shea was enjoying the dwarf's expression. He waved his hand in a forthright manner. Well, it's all in the past, not worth mentioning. I only killed a dragon, you don't need to look at me like that. Let's talk about how to use these things. In his mind, Dora once again snorted angrily. Rock took a deep breath, his tone somewhat hesitant. Respected General, if it was ordinary materials, I would dare to pat my chest and say that I, Rock, can personally forge them for you. But these dragon scales, I'm worried that my skills won't be able to make perfect use of these materials. If such precious materials are damaged, I'll be reprimanded by the gods. Heavens, what a good dragon scale! You can't? Shea frowned. Aren't you dwarves born to be blacksmiths? We dwarves are good at making utensils. Even women and children are better at making utensils than human craftsmen. But the problem is, these materials are too special. Only the real master craftsmen among us dwarves can make the best use of them. Although I can also make things, please understand that my profession is a warrior. Making tools is not what I'm best at. At this point, Rock swallowed his saliva. If you must let me forge, I'm afraid that some materials will be wasted in the process. Waste? If it's a waste, then let it be a waste. Shea waved his hand in a forthright manner. What a joke. It was not easy to get this opportunity to catch these dwarves to work for him. Where could he go to find other dwarven masters who were better at making weapons? Even if there were such dwarves, it was most likely impossible for them to work for him. Anyway, these dragon scales. There were still a few big boxes under his bed in the garrison residence. If worse came to worst, he would personally make a trip to the wildfire plains to find the cave where he had killed Dora. He would then peel off the remaining dragon scales and bring them back. In any case, he had plenty of them, so he wasn't afraid of wasting some. As long as he could create a weapon that satisfied him, thinking about wearing a set of dragon scale armor. How awe-inspiring would that be? Rock was shocked by Shea's heroism for a long time. This guy was simply committing a crime. Such precious dragon scales, yet he did not care about wasting them at all. However, with the dwarf's talent, Rock had already calculated quickly in his mind. Sir General, these dragon scales, I can make a set of armor, and a shield is also not a problem. A knight's hand shield can also be made into a half-body shield for infantry. As for the other materials, dragon tendon is a rare and precious material. It can be used as a bowstring to make a powerful bow. But you have to understand that dragon tendon can be used to make bowstrings, but there is no good material for a bow. Dragon scales are not enough? What about dragon bones? The material for a bow needs to be hard, tough, and elastic. Dragon scales and dragon bones are too hard, without elasticity and toughness, so they are not suitable for making a bow. Rock shook his head. Shea was somewhat disappointed. He used to be an excellent hunter, so his archery skills were naturally quite good. For an excellent archer, it was a pity that he did not have a good bow. He used to have a very powerful bow, but unfortunately, that howling bow was destroyed during the adventure in Demandra's lair. In this world, the people who are good at making bows are the Lantis people. Apart from them, there is only the elves, Rock said frankly. Especially the elves, their bow-making skills are even better than us dwarves. Now that there are elves in the city, Sir General might as well go and ask them. Shea nodded, this might be a way. But then Rock raised a new question. The dwarf looked at Shea, hesitated for a moment, and said, Respected Sir General, I can make the dragon scale armor and shield that you need. I will choose the best among the 400 brothers to make these things. As for the time, I think that with these precious materials and our dwarf race's excellent technology, a month should be enough to complete it. Yi Chun nodded. All right, I'll make the dragon scale armor and shield for you. But there is a problem. If you have any requests, just say it. Shea was very happy to think that he would be able to wear a full set of dragon scale armor in a month. It is not our problem, but this problem may cause you trouble. Oh! Boulder took a deep breath. You should know that dragon scales are a very heavy material. It's at least twice as heavy as a metal of the same size. And the armor you need is a full set of armor, as well as a shield. When the full set is made, I am afraid the weight will reach an unacceptable level. You are worried that I won't be able to wear such heavy things. Shea sneered. No, no, no. Rock shook his head and said in the most sincere tone, I absolutely believe in your strength. How could a warrior who could slay a dragon care about such a small burden? What I mean is, if you wear such heavy equipment, I am afraid it will be difficult to find a suitable mount for you. I know that you humans like horses the most, but I believe that no matter how majestic a horse is, it would be difficult for it to carry you who is wearing such a set of equipment. This was indeed a problem. Shea was originally a tall and strong man with a strong physique. He was also heavier than the average Byzantium warrior. If he added a full set of heavy dragon scale armor and shield, even if he had no problems, he was afraid that he would not be able to find a horse that could carry him. A full set of dragon scale armor and shield, I am afraid it will weigh 500 to 600 jin, plus Shea's own weight. Don't forget, Shea likes to use heavy weapons, such as battle axes and the like. Moreover, even the flaming fork he carries with him is also an extremely heavy object. Even if there were warhorses that had been strengthened by the muscle fruit's magical liquid, they wouldn't be able to carry him. If he forcefully used them, he was afraid that the horses would be exhausted before they could even run. Could it be that he was going to change from cavalry to infantry? Actually, perhaps I have a way to solve this problem. But this method, Rock said in a sneaky manner. He seemed to be a little nervous. Horse or no horse? That is the question. You know. Actually, I love both cavalry movies and military dramas. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com to read more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 518. GOR Chapter 478, The Last Deal. Shea looked at the dwarf's sneaky face and felt somewhat impatient. He waved his hand and said, If you have something to say, you don't have to hide it. Just say it directly. Rocky laughed in a seemingly simple and honest manner. After a few chuckles, he straightened his back and sternly said, Respected General, this full set of dragon attribute equipment is an extremely rare item even among us dwarves who are famous for our crafting skills. You should know that dragons are not creatures that are easy to encounter. Dragons generally like to stay in their own territories and don't like to move around at all. Occasionally, even if some dragons appear in this world, few people would dare to have any ideas about them due to their formidable strength. You should know that if a dragon is angered, the dragon's desire for revenge is very strong. Don't talk nonsense. Just get to the point. Shea frowned. What I mean is, since you have such luck to obtain such a rare set of equipment, then in order to achieve the best results, the mount is a very important part of the process. The dwarf said, I've heard of the ancient legends of the tribe. Only in ancient times did the Dragon Knight exist in the world. Those Dragon Knights had a large number of dragon attribute equipment. It is said that the top warriors of the human race in ancient times could make the dragons bow their proud heads and willingly be driven by them. Some dragons even signed a soul contract with the human knight and became the human Dragon Knight's mount. Often, when the dragon mount died in battle, the human knight would use the body part of the dead mount to make equipment in remembrance of their sacrificed mount and show that their loyal mount will always be with them. Hypocrite! Shea snorted. Everyone knows that the body of a dragon is a good material. Naturally, they wouldn't waste it. Using the body of a dead dragon mount to make equipment, if you want to use it, then just use it. What kind of nonsense is this about remembrance? Rocky, when did you dwarves become so long-winded? What exactly are you trying to say after all this time? Rock swallowed his saliva. It is said that the Dragon Knight of ancient times was very powerful. One of the reasons for this was because they possessed equipment with the dragon attribute. At the same time, they could use some of the dragon attribute's power after signing a soul contract with the dragon race. In other words, a set of dragon attribute equipment would only be activated in the hands of a dragon knight. Thus, its power is multiplied. Be it dragon bones or dragon scales, all of these materials naturally carry the attributes of the dragon race's power. Rock added, although in terms of quality these things are very sturdy and are top-quality materials, if you only focus on their sturdy quality, it would be too wasteful. Rumor has it that the ancient dragon knight wore dragon-attributed equipment and rode on a dragon mount. During battle, the knight and the dragon mount could call upon each other and summon the power of the dragon race, truly achieving the perfect fusion and display of power. Shea shook his head after hearing that. Where am I going to find a dragon to be my mount? Don't even think about it. Although this proposal was very tempting, Shea felt that it was better for him to be down to earth. Not to mention whether or not he could find a dragon, even if he could find one. How would he tame a dragon to be his mount? The difficulty of this problem was too high and the practicality was too low. Then, take a step back. Perhaps you can consider necromancy magic. When he said the last word, Rock's thick body suddenly trembled and shivered violently. Then, he murmured a prayer. Almighty Thunder God, please forgive me for saying such evil words. Necromancy magic. Shea's eyes lit up. That is, using undead to create undead creatures as pets or mounts. Rock's face was somewhat pale. And the most suitable choice for matching the dragon's power attribute is a bone dragon. Bone dragon? This is a very good proposal. Shea pinched Shea's neck and muttered to himself for a moment. Bone dragon, using necromancy magic to create undead creatures. He had heard of this kind of thing before. Previously, when he heard Todoro bragging, he had heard a similar rumor. However, the content of Todoro's boast was that there was a magician in the imperial capital who could use the bones of the dead to create walking and fighting skeleton soldiers. That kind of low-level stuff, Shea simply disdained. And the bone dragon, without a doubt, stood at the top of all magic undead creatures. Even in some legends, bone dragons were often evil and powerful existences. Well, our country bumpkins automatically ignored the evil part and only paid attention to the powerful part. Legend has it that some powerful dark magicians would create dark undead creatures. And in the legends there were some who had created bone dragons. It was said that some lucky magicians would find the bones of a dead dragon in an ancient battlefield and then collect the bones. Because of Dora's experience, Shea knew that the tradition of the dragon race was soul burial. The dragon clan was a very peculiar race. Under normal circumstances, when a dragon was about to reach the end of its lifespan, it would predict the end of its life. Therefore, before it died of old age, it would go to the sacred graveyard of the dragon clan and die there quietly. And the return of the soul to the sacred graveyard was also a tradition that the dragon race adhered to. If a dragon was unlucky and accidentally died somewhere else, such as suddenly dying in battle, then if the soul couldn't return to the sacred graveyard, it would often become a wandering soul. In most cases, a wisp of the soul would be attached to its own bones. Although with the passage of time, the power of the soul would gradually weaken and dissipate, gradually losing its original consciousness. After all, some of the power of the dragon's soul origin would more or less remain. And some powerful dark magicians would find the bones of this kind of dragon and then use dark magic to extract the remnant dragon soul attached to the bones. Then, using the remnant dragon soul, they would create undead creatures from the bones. This kind of undead creature was a bone dragon. Generally speaking, a bone dragon that was made into an undead creature would have a weaker fighting strength than a real dragon. But because of the remnant dragon soul, the bone dragon would often be able to use pure dragon-attributed power, even including part of dragon-attributed magic power. For magic casters who practiced dark magic, the bone dragon was the best concoction that they could only dream of. But refining a bone dragon was also extremely difficult, especially for dark magicians. This was especially true for dark magic mages. Refining the remnant souls of undead creatures was very dangerous. The stronger the soul source of the target being refined, the more dangerous it would be for the dark magic mage to encounter. Dragons were the most powerful creatures, and their soul origin was also the most powerful race. It was extremely difficult to refine the soul of a dead dragon. A bone dragon. That's a very interesting choice. Shea couldn't help but imagine such a scene in his mind. He was wearing a black dragon scale armor, and he was stepping on a huge undead creature composed of a huge white dragon skeleton. The huge bone dragon opened its skeletal mouth and issued a mournful roar. Shea couldn't help drooling. If he rode such a big guy on the battlefield, just the visual effect would shock a large number of people. If the enemy saw such a scene, wouldn't they faint from fright? The psychological deterrence of the enemy would be immeasurable. I still have a lot of dragon bones. If I don't have enough materials, I can still think of other ways. Shea had already begun to consider whether he should make a trip to the valley where Dora died and transport the rest of the dragon's remains. He frowned. But, to refine the bone dragon, I need to find a powerful magician who is adept at necromancy dark magic. After saying this, Shea looked at Rock's expression and immediately understood. Merlin? Could it be that Merlin's dark undead magic is very formidable? Shea laughed heartily. Rock sighed and said with a worried expression, "When Sir Merlin first came to our tribe, we offended him. As a result, Sir Merlin became angry and taught our tribe a big lesson." "Did he turn your grey-beard king into a frog?" Shea seemed to be rejoicing in their misfortune. "Not only that." Rock couldn't help shrinking his neck, as if recalling the scene of the past. It was still somewhat frightening. He swallowed hard and said, "Honorable General, you know that besides being proficient in refining ironware, we dwarves are also proficient in digging and mining. The place where the dwarves live has been dug into huge caves by us, but the wildfire plains used to be an ancient battlefield. We dwarves have lived there for so many years, and who knows how many remains of that ancient battlefield have been excavated. And that time, our disrespectful behavior towards Sir Merlin angered Sir Merlin, and he—" After saying this, Rock's voice trembled as he said, "Sir Merlin's appearance when he is angry is really too frightening. She used a dark magic that we couldn't understand to summon an army of undead skeletons from the countless corpses buried underground. It's easy to imagine hundreds and thousands of undead skeletons surging towards us from our underground caverns. To be honest, most of the warriors weren't knocked down, but instead were so scared that their legs went soft." Rock took a deep breath and said, "I think that since Sir Merlin can summon undead skeletons for him to use, he must be very proficient in dark undead magic. If you can ask him for help and refine a bone dragon for you, it would be a very suitable mount for you. Moreover, the The bone dragon's power attribute would allow the dragon armor on your body to display its greatest effect. Merlin is actually a black necromancer? Shea hadn't heard of this before. But that woman claimed to be the greatest magic genius in the world, as if she really knew all kinds of magic and was proficient in all kinds of magic. It seemed that there was no problem regarding magic that she couldn't solve. So it's quite possible. Very good, Rock. I'll carefully remember this suggestion of yours. If there's really a day when I can ride a bone dragon, I'll definitely remember your advice. Shea couldn't close his mouth from laughing. But at this time, a cold voice echoed in his mind. Get rid of your greedy thoughts. Be *****. Dora's voice was filled with anger. In Shea's memories, this female dragon rarely got so angry. You be *****. You actually wantonly talked about how to make a bone dragon in front of a proud dragon. Damn it. That kind of lowly undead creature is simply a stain on the pride of the dragon clan. Shea listened to Dora's reprimand but didn't think much of it. In any case, you're already dead. Borrowing your skeleton is also a waste. If I don't use it, I'll just bury it in the ground and let it rot. Don't even think about it. Dora sneered. I can tell you that it's impossible for you to use my skeleton to refine a bone dragon. Even if Merlin is an expert in dark necromancy magic, he can forget about using my skeleton to refine an undead creature. Heh, that's not up to you. Merlin will definitely find a way. Shea's performance was very shameless. He had made up his mind to fully utilize Dora's skeleton. Greedy idiot. Dora's tone was very disdainful. You really don't know anything about dark necromancy magic. That's right, dark necromancy magic can turn the skeleton of a living creature into an undead creature. However, don't forget, there must be a prerequisite. The skeleton must have a remnant soul attached to it. Could it be that your stupid brain of yours has forgotten? How can my soul still exist on my skeleton? When I died, my soul had already left my fleshly body and directly attached itself to your body. Humph, if you want to refine a bone dragon, you must have the skeleton of a dragon. The skeleton must have the remnant power of the dragon's soul source. However, my soul imprint is already on your body. How are you going to use my skeleton to refine a bone dragon? There will be no soul imprint at all. Unless you refine yourself into an undead creature. Ha 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 ha. Shea's face crumbled at once. No soul. Damn it, I forgot about this matter. Dora's soul had already attached itself to my body. How can there be any undead to refine from her skeleton? After the country bumpkin opened his mouth, he suddenly had an idea. You must have a way. Since you said that, then you must know that there are other ways, right? Dora's voice suddenly became incomparably cold. Kid, let's make a deal. Perhaps this will be the last deal between us. For some unknown reason, Dora's tone caused Shea to suddenly shiver. I didn't go back on my words this time. I'm going to resume updating. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 519. I didn't jump, I really didn't. It was just a bug, so I wasted some time. GLR Chapter 479 Oath. The sinister tone in Dora's voice caused even Shea's hair to stand on end. Shea's instincts told him that the condition this female dragon was about to propose was likely something unusual. Tell me about it. Shea's tone was very serious. Although I do not know what this deal is, I believe it will not be simple. Nothing you propose is easy. Don't forget, you have yet to complete your promise to send me back to the dragon graveyard. Dora sneered. However, don't forget, I allowed you to possess my body, allowing your soul to temporarily reside here. I am not treating you unfairly. Could it be you want your soul to scatter? Dora was silent for a moment. Fine, you have a point. Shea snickered. Besides, don't think of Lao Tzu as a fool. Although I am not from the Dragon Clan, I can tell with my toes that the dragon graveyard you mentioned is definitely something unusual. How could it possibly allow me to casually bring you in? The body of a Dragon Clan member is a priceless treasure for the other races. As for the ghost graveyard, it must be an extremely secretive place that cannot be found under normal circumstances. Additionally, there may be some extremely dangerous things in the graveyard. Who knows, there may be some kind of ambush or powerful guards. Otherwise, the dragon graveyard would be a treasure for the other races. Without any protection, the graveyard would have been dug up by the grave diggers of the other races hundreds of years ago. If Lao Tzu were to listen to you and foolishly run over, I fear he would not be able to return alive. When that happens, your Dora's soul will be able to return to the holy graveyard and get what you want. However, Shea Thunder's soul will have to remain in that ghost graveyard. After saying that, Shea harumphed. Am I right? Dora fell silent. She was rendered speechless by Shea's accusation. To be honest, she had repeatedly urged Shea to bring her back to the cemetery. Deep in her heart, she really did not have any good intentions. Seeing that this female dragon was speechless, Shea felt that he had already suppressed this fellow in terms of aura. Only then did his tone loosen a little. However, you finally taught me that move, Dragon Thrust. Hee, although I'm afraid you didn't have good intentions when you taught me this move. Every time I used this dragon stab, it was dangerous and placed a heavy burden on my body. However, it was extremely powerful. If my will wasn't strong enough and I was greedy for its power, I would overuse this move and my body would be destroyed. Who knows, I might even die one day. But no matter what, you've finally taught me. As for how I use it, that's my business. This condition can be considered as me owing you a favor. After saying that, Shea's tone seemed to be very magnanimous. Then, what other conditions do you have? Tell me. But you'd better think carefully before you speak. If you're too black-hearted, I won't be interested. Dora was silent for a long time. At this moment, her voice was heard once again. Not only did her tone not have the slightest bit of dejection, it instead carried a cold and arrogant tone. Kid, so much nonsense. Do you want a powerful dragon mount or not? This. Of course I do. Then it's fine. Dora coldly replied, My method can guarantee that your mount will be able to use the attributes of the Dragon Clan's strength. It can even support the Dragon Clan's magic so that your attack and defense will be greatly improved during battle. It can even allow you to possess some of the magical aspects of the Dragon Clan's magic. Shea's heart itched when he heard this. He could not help but ask, What method? Of course, you'll have to beg Merlin for my method. Only a great magician like Merlin can create a powerful undead creature. When Shea heard this, he could not help but ask curiously, Undead creature? Didn't you say that your bones can't be made into a bone dragon? Is this your idea to create an undead creature? Dora indifferently said, If you really want to understand, don't interrupt. Listen carefully to what I have to say. After a pause, Dora's voice was filled with disdain. What that dwarf said just now was simply too superficial and ignorant about dark necromancy magic. Shea, do you know what true dark necromancy magic is all about? Dora asked twice but did not get a response from Shea. She could not help but become annoyed. I'm asking you a question. Why aren't you answering? Shea said loudly with a straight face. Didn't you tell me not to interrupt? Dora. Shea impatiently said, Okay. Of course I don't know what the hell necromancy magic is. Since you asked like this, then you must know it very clearly. Just say it directly. Why are you deliberately making things difficult for me by asking this kind of question and making me look very ignorant? Does it make you feel so good? If it were not for the fact that she still needed Shea's help, Dora really wanted to ignore this scoundrel. Undead. Undead black magic has always been misunderstood by the world. Dora's voice sounded as if she was gnashing her teeth. She hatefully said, "Undead black magic is not only studied by you human magicians. Other races also have dark necromancy magic. For example, our dragon race has a branch called the Dark Dragon Clan. They live in the Dark Abyss. That branch of the Dark Dragon Clan is good at dark magic. Another example is the Elven race. There are also dark fallen elves. They are also independent of other elven tribes and are famous for their dark magic. But whether it is humans, elves, or our dragon race, they all have a hostile attitude towards dark magic. They even think that any dark necromancy magic is a symbol of depravity and evil. Nonsense." Shea finally could not help but interrupt. "There are only evil magicians, there are no evil magic. Any power depends on the master who wields it. No matter how sharp a knife is in the hands of a butcher, it can only kill pigs. In the hands of a warrior, it can kill people. Such a simple logic." Dora seemed to let out a helpless laugh. "Any race has a deep-rooted bad habit, and that is, anything that they do not understand or are unfamiliar to them, they will have a vigilant and even hostile attitude. This kind of nature exists in many races. Perhaps only the goblins of ancient times had that kind of heart that could truly accept everything." Shea's heart suddenly moved. "Since you said this, then it seems that in your eyes, dark magic is not the same as evil?" "Of course not." Dora's tone was somewhat proud. "I am not comparable to those stupid, stubborn, and conservative fellows." After a pause, Dora continued. "All right, don't interrupt me any more. I can tell you that the so-called dark necromancy magic is actually not a symbol of evil. It is just that dark necromancy magic is specialized in the study of the undead. For every race, the tradition has always been to respect the dead. For those who have passed away, they all think that letting their souls rest in peace is the right path. And the study of the undead by dark necromancy magic is considered to be blasphemy and disturbing to the souls of the dead. It is disrespectful to the dead. This may be a traditional view, but in fact, every mage who is proficient in dark necromancy magic can be said to be an expert in the study of souls. Whether it is us dragons, humans, or other races, for thousands of years, we have done our best to study all kinds of powers. We even wanted to use the power of nature to produce countless powerful mages, warriors, and warriors. Some could even borrow the power of heaven and earth. But the sad thing is that we have never been able to truly understand ourselves. We don't even understand our own souls. We don't understand the power and the various miraculous aspects of our souls. Perhaps this is the sorrow of all races. All right, let's not waste time with these seemingly noble words. Just tell me what you want." Shea stroked his chin and said, "Listening to you, a cunning female dragon, say such words that bemoan the state of the universe and pity the fate of mankind, this father's scalp is numb." Dora snorted in annoyance. "Every necromancer is an expert in the study of souls. They truly understand the mysteries of the soul that most people don't know about. You know that in order to create an undead creature, you have to extract the remaining soul power from the remains of the creature, and then use special dark magic to refine it. Many people think that the most powerful and terrifying aspect of necromancers lies in refining those undead creatures. But everyone is wrong. In fact, many necromancers themselves don't even realize what's truly magical or precious about the fields they're researching." At this point, Dora's tone seemed to be somewhat agitated, her voice trembling. "The most miraculous aspect of necromancers, or perhaps the most precious aspect of their research, is not how to refine the souls of undead creatures. Rather, it is to extract them from the bones. Silly boy, do you understand now?" The most miraculous aspect of necromancers lies in the fact that they can extract the souls from the flesh. Then, he would inject the refined undead back into his physical body. Shea, do you understand the subtlety of this? Shea opened his mouth wide. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. Every thought made his brain feel as if it was struck by lightning. Extracting souls, inject souls. After Dora's reminder, Shea immediately realized the true miraculous aspect of this subtlety. Since necromancers could extract souls from the bones of living creatures, then they might also have a way to extract souls from the bodies of living creatures. No, it wasn't just a possibility, it was indeed possible. Because Shea had also heard that there were some particularly evil necromancers who liked to refine living creatures into undead creatures for their own use. In other words, necromancers could extract the souls of living creatures from their bodies. Similarly, they could also inject souls into a flesh body. In an instant, Shea immediately understood what Dora meant. You female dragon, you want to. Dora was silent for a while. I'm already dead, my flesh body has been destroyed, but my soul hasn't dissipated. I have a soul, but I don't have a flesh body. Then, what I need is an outstanding supreme necromancer who can use miraculous necromancy magic to inject my soul back into a flesh body suitable for me. At this point, Dora's voice trembled with every word. I want to be alive. Shea was silent for a long time. Shea didn't seem to have much of a reaction to Dora's last words. In fact, he was still immersed in shock at the ability of necromancers to extract souls and inject them into flesh bodies. This ability was the true value of necromancers. Even if this method could be used, it could even allow anyone to achieve true immortality. After all, the lifespan of any race was currently limited by the flesh body. Once the flesh body aged, the skills would decline, and eventually death would cause the soul to dissipate and die as well. Then, if it was possible to get rid of the shackles of the flesh body, suppose, when a person's flesh body aged, before the flesh body reached the end of its lifespan, necromancy magic could be used to extract the soul and then inject it into a new flesh body full of vitality. Wouldn't it be equivalent to? In this way, wouldn't life have an end? This conjecture was really too shocking. After a long silence, Shea took a deep breath. I'm afraid you're oversimplifying things. Although you're very smart since you can think of it, don't tell me that the other necromancers in the past thousands of years were all fools? Didn't they think of it? They thought of it. Dora sneered. Haven't you heard of some particularly powerful necromancers who didn't hesitate to refine themselves into undead creatures to achieve immortality? It can be seen that my conjecture is feasible. After a pause, Dora slowly said, My soul is not destroyed now, what I need is a flesh body. Then, as my request, you only need to consult Lord Merlin and ask him, with his erudite and exquisite magical knowledge, with his research on dark necromancy magic, whether he can do this. I can try, but I know the chances may not be high, but this may be the only hope for my resurrection. Even if there's only a 1 in a million chance, I still want to try. Dora's voice was filled with excitement. Then, you said my mount. Shea immediately recalled the topic he had mentioned at the beginning. If you can ask Lord Merlin to use dark necromancy magic to resurrect me, I can regain my life and return to the human world as a dragon. Then, Shea thunder. Dora's voice suddenly became incomparably serious. I, Dora, swear on my soul, my pride as a dragon, my ancestors, and everything that we've built together. If I am resurrected, I am willing to sign a soul contract with you and become your mount. And you, Shea Thunder, will become the first proud and legendary great dragon knight to appear on the continent since ancient times. If you want to know what happens next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 521. I did not go back on my words. I said that there will be 2 chapters today. This chapter is 8,000 words long, so it can be considered as 2 chapters in one. However, due to the fact that it is a coherent plot, I did not split it into 2 chapters. I hereby state this so that it will not cause any more argument. GOR Chapter 480. Are you willing? The attendant that Shea had arranged to stay in the backyard loyally carried out Shea's orders. He stood guard outside the backyard and waited for any movements within the backyard. The courtyard was silent and not a single sound could be heard. Due to how terrifying Sir Merlin was, no one dared to take even half a step into the courtyard. As for the attendant, he simply sat far away outside the courtyard and watched. As Shea was rushing back, he nearly knocked over the attendant who was standing guard. Seeing that the general had returned, the attendant was about to report. "Sir, the backyard." Shea did not have the time to listen to him. He quickly gave an N and strode inside. "Merlin! Merlin!" Shea rushed into the backyard and slammed his way into the room in the middle. Even before reaching the door, he was already shouting loudly. Merlin's impatient voice came from inside the door. There was anger in his voice as he said, "What is it now? Could it be that the dwarves are disobedient?" Shea grabbed the door handle and pushed with all his might. However, the door would not budge. "I have an urgent matter to discuss with you. Hurry up and open the door. Kid." Merlin's voice was filled with displeasure. "Like I said, it is really urgent," Shea shouted loudly. "It has something to do with necromancy magic." Merlin, who was inside, was suddenly silent. Then, a sigh could be heard. "All right, come in." Following Merlin's words, the tightly shut door gently opened on its own. Shea had no time to think about it. He took a step forward and stepped inside. The moment he stepped inside, the door behind him quickly closed. After entering the room, Shea raised his head and looked around. What he saw left him dumbfounded. How was this still the small room in the backyard? Although the garrison of Denzel City had been renovated after Shea took over, it was, after all, just a small border city. Naturally, it was impossible for the garrison to be too extravagant and grand. The backyard wasn't big to begin with, and the rooms weren't spacious either. Originally, this room was supposed to have 2 floors. The living room outside was only 3 to 5 meters wide, and the bedroom inside was slightly bigger, only about 5 meters wide. However, when Shea walked through the door, the small hall, which was originally only 3 to 5 meters wide, was now, how was this a small hall? The place where Shea was at right now was more than 10 meters deep. There were 5 to 6 rows of huge cabinets neatly stacked around the room. Each of the cabinets was densely packed with thick books. Each of the books looked thicker than a thick brick. The weight of each book was probably enough to kill a person. There were also some large cabinets that were neatly stacked with various bottles and containers. There were also some skeletons of various frightening creatures that seemed to have been soaked in some kind of special potion. They were placed in the same manner as when they were alive, propped up on the shelves. The thing that gave Shea the most chills was the complete human skeleton that was placed upon one of the cabinets before him. The 2 large empty eye sockets upon the skull were staring right at him. Then, as Shea was gaping, the jaw of the skeleton suddenly opened up and a human voice came out. "Stupid kid, what are you standing there for? Don't you have something urgent to attend to? Hurry up and come in." That was Merlin's voice? The voice coming out from the skeleton was actually Merlin's. Shea felt as though his brain was not enough to process all of this. "Go in the innermost door on the left. Don't go in the wrong direction." The skeleton spoke one last time and then stopped moving. "The innermost door on the left? Damn it, how many more doors are there?" Shea circled around a row of cabinets and indeed, he saw a long and gloomy passageway. Standing at the entrance of the passageway and looking in, he estimated that it was at least tens of meters deep. On both sides of the passageway were rows upon rows of tightly shut doors. Was this still Lao Tzu's backyard? From the outside, this house looked so small. How could it be that, after walking in, it was as big as a maze? With apprehension in his heart, Shea stepped inside. Just as he took a few steps, he suddenly heard a beast-like roar coming from a door on the right. Some doors emitted a strong and strange smell similar to medicine, and some doors were quiet. But just as Shea walked past, he suddenly heard a loud bang coming from inside, followed by the sound of some kind of beast howling in pain. Finally reaching the end of the passageway, Shea pushed the innermost door on the left and gently opened it. Just as the door opened a crack, Shea heard a familiar howl coming from inside. I can't. I beg you, Sir Merlin, please let me go, I really can't." "Can't? Even if you can't, you have to. If I, Merlin, want to do something, there is nothing I can't do. You have to hold on for me. What's so scary? I really can't take it any more. Sir Merlin, please let me go." No, not enough. I want more. How could this be enough? I need more." That howling voice was surprisingly his loyal and brave servant, Great Mage Todoro. Shea finally entered the room. Looking around, this place was 7 or 8 meters deep. Looking up and under his feet, the roof and floor were all smooth stone slabs, and on the side, there was a huge smooth table with all kinds of strange utensils, none of which Shea could recognize. Some were transparent glass bottles being boiled in a small stove, and some had strange tubes attached to them, connecting them to another bottle. And our pitiful Sir Todoro was in the middle of the room. In the middle of the room, there was a huge transparent glass trough that was as tall as a person. Well, in Shea's opinion, this thing's shape was really similar to something he recognized. Right, it was a coffin. And after Shea took a few more looks, he couldn't help but laugh. That's right. It didn't look like a coffin. Rather, it was a transparent crystal coffin made of glass. This sealed crystal coffin was filled with a kind of green liquid. Moreover, it appeared incomparably viscous, just like Shea suddenly recalled the pudding he ate for dinner a few days ago. Then, he felt a wave of nausea and quickly made up his mind to never eat pudding again. The pitiful Todoro was soaked in this transparent glass coffin, his whole body immersed in that translucent green liquid like pudding, even his head was soaked in it. However, there was something like a funnel inserted into his mouth, exposing him outside the liquid, allowing him to speak and breathe. What made Shea feel the most sympathy was that Todoro's body was shockingly naked. This guy was soaked in the liquid, his whole body as naked as a newborn baby. His whole body was bony and his arms and legs were thin and weak. How come he didn't notice that this guy was so skinny? Even his stomach looked like it was stuffed in. Additionally, there were several strange leather tubes inserted into Todoro's body. The ends of the tubes were pierced deeply into his body with needles. Shea took a few more glances and was able to make out something. There were 3 leather tubes inserted into Todoro's left arm. The liquid flowing out from the tubes was red in color. It looked like blood. Todoro was bleeding out. As for the 3 tubes on the right side of his body, they seemed to be pumping a red liquid into his body. The red liquid was not blood. It was darker in color than normal blood, so red that it was almost black in color. Shea noticed that the tubes inserted into Todoro's body were all connected to the huge vessel on the table in front of him. The blood flowing out from his body flowed through the leather tubes into the vessel. Then, it was boiled under high temperature by several strange vessels. Some strange medicinal liquid was also injected into the blood. There was even a peculiar powder, which exuded a magical glow. One of the scents was somewhat familiar to Shea. It was the scent of the blood of a magic beast. Finally, after going through several processes, the blood was injected into a circular sealed glass vessel. After going through several layers of peculiar filtration, The blood was continuously injected into Todoro's body through the leather tubes. What is going on here? Shea was completely dumbfounded. Merlin was standing before the huge table. Her robe was spotless and there was a strange round leather hat on her head. The hat covered her entire head of hair, and not a single strand of hair was exposed. Merlin was wearing a monocle over her eyes, and she was staring at the color of the liquid within the vessel. When she heard Shea's words, she impatiently raised her head and glanced at Shea. "It's nothing, I am changing his blood." Changing his blood. Shea felt that he could not understand a single word she said. Could it be possible to change the blood of a person? At that moment Todoro, who was inside the glass coffin, heard Shea's voice. The pitiful magician was soaked in the viscous liquid, and was unable to open his eyes. However, his ears could still hear. When he heard Shea's voice, it was as though his savior had arrived. He immediately shouted loudly, "Master! Master! Benevolent Master! Please save your pitiful and loyal servant. I am about to die. Master, save me!" So noisy. Merlin's face sank and she shouted, "I told you, you won't die. However, you cannot shout or move about during the changing of blood. Otherwise, it will cause danger. You idiot, why won't you listen? If you shout again, I will stuff your mouth." Woo 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 woo. Todoro burst into tears. Shea looked at Todoro, and could not help but feel pity for him. He could not help but sigh. Hearing Shea's sigh, Merlin immediately turned around and glared at him. "What are you sighing for? What, do you have a problem with my way of doing things?" "No. Not at all." Shea immediately shook his head with all his might. "Alright, let's cut the crap. Just tell me what's going on. Why are you suddenly interested in necromancy magic? You'd better tell me something that interests me. Otherwise, I'll stuff you into that coffin and soak with him." "Sure enough, it is a coffin," Shea muttered in his heart. However, he immediately perked up. Shea knew that this crazy woman was not joking. If his words did not satisfy her, she would really throw him into that coffin to accompany Todoro. Although he sympathized with this guy, it was one thing. Sleeping in a coffin with him was another thing. Uncle Shea did not have such lofty sentiment. "The matter is like this. I know that you should be very proficient in necromancy magic." Shea had just opened his mouth when Merlin sneered. He raised his eyebrows and coldly said, "Humph, that talkative dwarf." Shea immediately began to pray for the pitiful dwarf rock. Then, he could not help but glance at the glass coffin, and, this coffin is big enough. Stuffing another dwarf in would not be a problem. Cough cough. Shea coughed dryly before continuing, I know that you are very proficient in necromancy magic." "There is no magical domain in this world that I do not understand," Merlin said coldly. Yes. Shea nodded repeatedly. Don't I just happen to have a set of dragon bones in my hands? Also, I asked the dwarves to create a full set of dragon scale equipment for me. Well, you know how heavy it is. I don't have a suitable horse to ride on, but the dwarves gave me an idea. Perhaps I can ask you to help me create a bone dragon with undead dark magic. It's just right. That is not possible. Merlin immediately interrupted Shea. This master magician narrowed his eyes and looked at Shea. "Your dragon bones. Humph, that dragon soul is hidden in your body, right? A skeleton without a soul cannot be made into an undead creature. How can an undead creature be made without a soul?" Sure enough, a master magician like Merlin was able to discern the problem with his previous naive idea. "I understand. So, my question now is, next," Shea stuttered as he explained what he had heard from Dora about necromancy magic extraction and the infusion of living souls. He spoke intermittently for a long time. In the beginning, Merlin's expression was very impatient. However, as Shea spoke more and more, the impatient expression on Merlin's face gradually disappeared and was replaced by a gradually emerging dignified expression. Finally, after Shea finished speaking, Merlin did not immediately make any response. This woman narrowed her eyes and stared at Shea for a long time with a gaze that seemed to flash with cold stars. Shea felt goosebumps rising in his heart. Then, Merlin suddenly smiled strangely. There was a cold, mocking quality to her smile. "This idea, is it the soul of the dragon in your body who urged you on?" Shea did not deny it. In fact, he did not intend to hide it. After all, he was an idiot when it came to magic. Talking about necromancy magic was an unusual thing in itself. Given Merlin's intelligence, how could she not have guessed it? Dispel this absurd and unrealistic idea. Merlin suddenly shouted in a stern voice. "I'll pretend I didn't hear you. Hurry up and dispel this idea. Also, I'm warning you. If you dare to come up with this absurd and extremely dangerous idea to fool this kid again, I will extract you from his body and refine you into a golem puppet. Do you understand?" In this stern voice, the threat and warning were overflowing. Shea's body trembled, and he could not help but say, "Merlin, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the soul of the dragon in your body. It came up with such a ridiculous idea. It's simply harming you. You idiot bastard, you don't understand at all." Merlin gritted her teeth and sneered. "Want to be resurrected? Ridiculous. To live is to live, and to die is to die. This is the natural order of life in this world. To use such a ridiculous idea to break the supreme natural order of life, for a dead thing to want to come back to life, that is simply a ridiculous and absurd idea. But necromancers can indeed extract and inject souls." Shea could not help but argue. In his heart, he was moved by Dora's description of the idea of the first dragon knight to appear since ancient times. Think about it, in the entire continent, was there any dragon knight left? A dragon knight. He imagined himself riding a dragon on the battlefield, looking cool. Damn it, just that image, that aura, was enough to shock people to death. He did not want to give up such a grand dream so easily. Looking at the excited expression on Shea's face, Merlin sighed inwardly. He changed his tone to a gentler one and slowly said, "Shea, do you understand what life is? Do you really understand?" Life. Shea's lips twitched. As the name suggests, why is life called life by us? Because life itself is special. It is life, so it is called life. Life and death are the natural order of this world. No, it cannot even be called a natural order. It is the natural order of life that is above all other orders. It is the greatest foundation for the creation and construction of this world. If the natural order of life and death can be broken, then, what will happen to this world? I can tell you, if this natural order can be broken, then the structure of this world and the natural order of this world will collapse with a loud bang. Merlin's words were slow and solemn. However, they carried with them an unquestionable sense of decisiveness and decisiveness. Life and death, these are two opposite states. It is precisely because of these two opposite states that this world can be stabilized. They are the basic order that restricts and maintains this world. You must know that anything, anyone, any living thing, anything, there is no such thing as eternity. Everything would die one day or be destroyed and dissipated. Even the sun, the moon, and the stars. The Odin god Emperor Hannigan was a hero of his generation, but even he could not escape the natural order of death. Even if his strength was godly, there would still be a day when he reached the end of his life. Don't be in a hurry to argue. I only have one question for you. From what you know, from ancient times until now, is there anyone? No, is there anything that is eternal and immortal? No. Shea could answer immediately. From ancient times until now, there was no one who was immortal. However, immortal, that depends on what you are talking about. I admit, it's a little shocking that a creature can't die. However, you don't have to be so absolute. Shea shook his head. There may not be immortal people, but things. Although steel is hard, there will be a day when it will rust. Although the mountains and rivers are eternal, there will be a day when the mountains and rivers collapse. Although the rivers are eternal, there will be a day when they dry up. I can tell you very clearly that there is nothing in this world that is immortal. That. Shea was forced into a corner and he blurted out. But at least there are some spirits that are eternal, right? Don't we often talk about immortality? Ha 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 ha. Merlin was amused by Shea's words. She could not help but let out a sharp laugh. Then, she narrowed her pair of beautiful eyes and stared at Shea. Who would have thought that someone like you would actually believe in this seemingly noble nonsense, immortality? Humph humph, what a joke. After saying that, Merlin took a deep breath. Then, using a cold and indifferent tone, she quickly spoke. 1,200 years ago, before the Byzantine Empire, there was once a powerful kingdom in the southern part of the continent. The king, Samulin, was a hero of his generation. He was upright and benevolent, brave and strong. In addition to his great strength, he was known as the #1 warrior of the continent. His bravery, his integrity, his compassion and benevolence were all praised by the people of the continent. The kingdom that he ruled once had the opportunity to unify the southern part of the continent and establish a huge empire similar to Byzantium. However, what happened in the end? Merlin deliberately paused and said indifferently, "In the history books of the Byzantine Empire, there is no record of that former king of the continent. His so-called loyalty, bravery, strength and benevolence were praised by the people of that time as the immortal sentiments of a saint, and no one mentioned them again." Without waiting for Shea to refute, Merlin continued, 900 years ago, there was once an outstanding scholar of the continent. His erudition was praised by the people of the continent. He was even known as the smartest person in the world at that time. His unremitting study of knowledge was worshipped by the scholars of the world as an idol. However, what happened in the end? Because his theories angered the church, the field of his research was deemed as blasphemous by the church. As a result, he was executed, and all the documents of his theories were destroyed. Not only did his body perish, but even his spirit was destroyed as well. In the history books of the empire, you can see his name and records. He was described as an evil heretic. Let's talk about the things you are familiar with. The ancient goblins. How glorious were they in the past? They created a civilization that far surpassed the current world. However, you have seen what the goblins are like now. They were once the smartest race, but now they are considered the stupidest, weakest, and most inferior race. The beggars among humans are 10,000 times nobler than the goblins. Not only did the goblins die as a race, their civilization, their spirit, they all died. Let's talk about the language. You know about the holy city of Babylon. That was the capital of the ancient human empire. I won't talk to you about the fall of that empire. Let me tell you, that ancient human empire, the humans of that time spoke an ancient language that we cannot understand even now. However, as time passed, the civilization of that empire was annihilated by the waves of time. Even the ancient human language disappeared and became extinct. That is why I am telling you. In this world, there is nothing that cannot die. Whether it is a person or an object, there will be a day when they die. All of this cannot be reversed. Even I, Merlin, the most illustrious great magician of the present age. Countless people respect me, praise me, worship me, hate me. But so what? In the future, after I die, perhaps my name can still be passed down for a few more years. However, after a few more decades, even after a few hundred years, no one will mention me anymore. All traces of me in this world will be erased. It will be as if I have never existed. Another example is you, Shea Thunder. You are now one of the heroes of the present age, an overlord. In my opinion, you may even reach a higher position. However, even if you are a famous general, a hero of a generation, an overlord of a generation, so what? Even if you become the emperor after a few hundred years, no matter how great your achievements are, no matter how amazing your achievements are, you will only become 2 thin pages in the history book. At most, it will be the number of words. And after a few hundred years, when the world changes, perhaps the Byzantine Empire's civilization will disappear. When that time comes, even the history books will no longer have records of you. Everything about you, and everything that symbolizes you, has completely disappeared. Shea was completely speechless. This is the law. This is an irreversible, untouchable, undefiable law. Life and death are the 2 opposites of existence. Without life, how can there be death? Without death, there is no such thing as life. Your naive and childish attempt to subvert it is simply too laughable. But Shea's forehead was covered in cold sweat. It is said that some necromancers, in order to pursue immortality, have turned themselves into undead creatures, becoming the legendary necromancers. Shea proposed the last thing he could think of. Undead necromancers? Ha 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 ha. Merlin seemed to have heard the funniest thing in the world. Those fellows, after learning some necromancy magic, do not know the immensity of heaven and earth, thinking that they have mastered the law of life and death, turning themselves into undead creatures, no matter what they are called in the future, necromancers or undead necromancers. You have to understand, in essence, they are already dead as humans. Those fellows who have become necromancers have already lost the most basic characteristics of humans. Emotions, fertility, etc., they have already become monsters. As humans, they are already dead. Moreover, even if they become undead creatures, even if their bodies are strengthened and can be used for a longer period of time, after losing the emotions that humans should have, their consciousness will gradually become blurred and distorted. Finally, they will completely disappear, becoming beasts without consciousness. And in the end, destruction is the only way back. In the end, Merlin said coldly, moreover, life cannot be reversed. You have to understand, things that are already dead cannot be resurrected. Take those necromancers, for example. After turning themselves into undead creatures, they are already dead. There is no way for them to become living humans again. People often refer to undead creatures as undead creatures, believing that they cannot die. To put it bluntly, it was more accurate to say that these undead creatures weren't easily harmed by ordinary forces. As for their undead, that is a joke. Because they have already died. Something that has already died once cannot die a second time. Finally, the same goes for that dragon you mentioned. I have no way, nor can I do what you said, to put its soul back into a living body and resurrect it. Even a god cannot do that. Even a god cannot override the laws of this world. The last little flame of hope in Shea's heart was extinguished. Looking at Merlin, Shea sighed helplessly. Could it be my dream of becoming a dragon knight has been shattered? Dragon knight? Strangely, Merlin's eyes suddenly turned strange and his laughter carried with it a peculiar emotion. Only Todoro, who was lying in the glass coffin, understood Merlin's laughter the most. The pitiful Sir Todoro, who had been tormented by Merlin's laughter, immediately realized, once Merlin let out that laughter, it meant that this crazy woman was up to some crazy idea. This woman must be plotting something again. As expected, as Shea was feeling dejected, Merlin suddenly used a piercing gaze to stare at Shea. Then, using a peculiar tone, he asked, You want to become a dragon knight so much? Of course. Shea showed no hesitation. Becoming a dragon knight is so awe-inspiring. To have a dragon as my mount. How much do you want that? Even in my dreams. Good. Merlin suddenly rubbed his sharp chin and smiled even more dangerously. Then, using the standard tone of a big bad wolf trying to trick Little Red Riding Hood, he asked Shea with a benevolent smile, "Then, I have to ask you this. In order to achieve your dream of becoming a Dragon Knight, how much are you willing to pay? You should know that becoming a Dragon Knight is not a simple matter. The price you have to pay, maybe, might be a little bit more. Are you willing?" I did not go back on my words. I said that there would be 2 chapters today. This chapter is 8,000 words long, so it can be considered as 2 chapters in one. Only because it is a coherent plot, I did not split it into 2 chapters. I hereby state this so as to avoid any more argument. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 523. I won't go back on my word. 9,000 words, mission complete. GOR Chapter 481. What is that? The servant who was standing outside the backyard watched as the general walked out unscathed. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. However, judging by the expression on General Shea's face, it would appear that he was not in a good mood. Shea's face was calm enough. It would be more accurate to say that his face was dark. Strangely enough, his dark face was not filled with anger. Instead, there were traces of awkwardness and grievance. It was as though he had just received some sort of humiliation. Son of a bitch, the price, that damned Merlin, what kind of nonsensical idea did he come up with? Shea was feeling vexed. More than that, he felt a sense of helplessness. Son of a bitch, if the price that Merlin mentioned was to be paid. Lao Tzu did not want to become some damned Dragon Knight. After rushing out of the backyard and into his office, Dora's voice rang out in his mind. Sir Merlin, the method I told you, what is it? What kind of price do you have to pay? Why do you seem to be in such a strange mood? Shea did not say anything. He simply gave a harumph. Back in the backyard, when Merlin told them about the price and the method, he had used a peculiar spell to temporarily cut off the sensory connection between Dora and Shea. The method I told you cannot be known to that cunning dragon for now. After you hear it, it would be best for you not to tell it as well. That was Merlin's request. No, it would be more accurate to say that it was an order. Thus, Dora did not know what Merlin had told Shea in the end. As for Shea, son of a bitch, Lao Tzu would never tell Dora about this method. No, I won't even think of such a method in the future. He would never even think of mentioning it again. Merlin's words should be left to rot in his stomach. Shea was feeling very impatient. Don't ask, I will never tell you this Dragon Knight thing, let's forget about it. Dora was still somewhat unwilling. But Xiao, don't tell me you don't want a mount? After you put on the dragon scale armor, you won't have a mount. Son of a bitch. Shea was irritated by those words. He really had to rub salt in his wound. Shea's anger. Suddenly, he slapped the table. Lao Tzu, if I can't, I'll ask the dwarves for a subterranean beast. That thing can carry a few thousand kilograms, so it should have no problem carrying me. F***ck. I can't ride a real dragon, so I'll ride a subterranean beast. Subterranean, I've heard subterranean. That's just a rumor. Dora was very dissatisfied with Shea's insulting words about the dragon race's noble bloodline. Anyway, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Shea angrily ended their conversation. No matter how much Dora tried to argue, Shea ignored her. After sulking in his room for a while, Shea waited for his mood to calm down a bit before he went out again. He rode out of the city and headed to the barracks outside. He really did what he thought. He went straight to the dwarves' encampment, found Boulder, and straightforwardly made his request. I need a subterranean beast to be my mount for the time being. When the dwarf heard this request, He grinned and looked at Shea. The honest Boulder couldn't help but speak the truth. That, honorable general, well, the subterranean beasts that we dwarfs tame can carry a lot of weight, but these creatures run too slowly. A normal human can run faster than them at full speed. I'm afraid they're not suitable as mounts on the battlefield. Shea didn't believe him. He dragged Boulder over and had the dwarf bring over a subterranean beast to test it out. The subterranean beast did indeed look a bit like a dragon. It was no wonder the legends said that these creatures were related to the dragon race. In terms of appearance, the subterranean beast looked very much like an Earth-type dragon, but it was much smaller. The subterranean beast that Boulder brought over had a body that was at least 3 times thicker than the strongest bull. Its neck wasn't as long as a real dragon's, but its limbs were as thick as a 100-year-old tree trunk. Its tough limbs were covered in thick scales that were extremely hard to the touch. Boulder explained that the subterranean beast's skin was very tough, even petrifying. Ordinary swords couldn't cut through its skin, and only the mighty dwarves could hurt it with their heavy hammers. After hearing Boulder's proud introduction, Shea shamelessly stroked his chin and made an even more shameless request. "This one's tough. Can I try cutting it?" Boulder almost fell to the ground when he heard this. "Cutting it? Others might be fine, but you're a warrior who can slay dragons. No matter how tough the subterranean beast's skin is, it can't withstand a strike from a dragon slayer." The subterranean beast that Boulder had brought over was something he'd tamed himself. How could he bear to let Shea test it out? When he saw Boulder's expression, Shea laughed dryly. "I'm just kidding. I'm not the one trying it out. How about I let my soldiers try it out?" Rock hesitated for a moment and looked at the few guards standing behind Shea. Although these guards could be considered as strong human men, in the eyes of the dwarves, there was nothing special about them. All right. To be safe, Boulder even said that he had to be the one to choose. Then the honest dwarf circled around Shea's guards twice and finally picked out a guy who looked the youngest and was the least muscular. Boulder had his own reasons for picking this person. From the dwarf's point of view, strength was directly proportional to age. The older one was, the more time they'd spent cultivating, and the stronger they'd become. This young human warrior he'd picked didn't look very old. How long could he have practiced martial arts? Besides, Shea's group of bodyguards were all burly and full of murderous aura. Only this one looked slightly more pleasing to the eye and was a little more amiable, but soon, Boulder realized that he'd made a fatal mistake. "Oh? Hawk, our dwarven brothers have chosen you." Shea's eyes showed a trace of sympathy. He looked at Boulder and patted his shoulder. "Good eyesight. This is the #1 expert among my guards." "#1 expert?" Boulder's mouth immediately fell open. The one the dwarves picked was Hawk, the young leader of the mercenary group who'd run amok in the Wildfire Plains. Shea had recruited 2 mercenary groups from the Wildfire Plains. The leader of the 2 mercenary groups, Russell, was steady and cautious and was already serving in the army. As for Huoku, because his temperament was too intense, he temporarily stayed by Shea's side as the head of the guards. All along, Huoku had been in charge of the garrison mansion's guards and did not follow Shea to battle. At this moment, the other guards by Shea's side were all strengthened cavalry warriors from the strong cavalry camp. From their appearance, these warriors who'd been strengthened by the muscle fruit's magic liquid were all taller and more robust than Hawk, although Hawk himself was a rare brawny man. Moreover, these strong cavalry camp's warriors were all seasoned veterans who'd killed countless people and experienced scenes of corpses and blood. Each of them was full of killing intent. Hawk was only a mercenary before, so his killing intent was naturally inferior to the strong cavalry camp's guards. However, Shea wasn't exaggerating when he said that Hawk was the #1 expert among his guards. Hawk was a standard mercenary warrior. His martial arts were very exquisite, and his strength had already reached the level of a mid-ranked warrior of the Empire. He could skillfully use his do-chi, and his martial arts were very strong. He could be considered a good master. As for the other guards, although they were full of killing intent, they weren't orthodox martial warriors after all. They'd only been trained in the army. In terms of individual strength, they really couldn't compare to Hawk. Rock's face was filled with apprehension. Huoku grinned and strode out. The young mercenary warrior pulled out a long-handled machete from behind his back. The warhammer and axe that Hawk originally used weren't suitable for the role of leader of the guards, so he'd switched to a long-handled machete. This machete had been specially forged. The back of the blade was a finger thick and made of high-quality iron, so it was very heavy. Hawk held the machete in his hand and strode to the subterranean beast's side. The young warrior sneered. The subterranean beast seemed to sense Hawk's killing intent and immediately let out a low growl filled with hostility. Although its body moved, the chain around its neck was still in Rock's hand. It had been tamed, so it didn't dare to struggle too much. Hawk had already raised his machete. He glanced at Shea and saw Shea wink at him. Hawk immediately understood and shouted. Suddenly, the warrior's blade and his entire body erupted with the light of do-chi. As soon as he saw the warrior's do-chi erupt, Rock's vision darkened. He thought to himself, "It's over." A human warrior's do-chi was a symbol of strength. Dwarves naturally knew this. Dwarves tamed subterranean beasts individually, so they could be considered their private property. Raising a subterranean beast from a young age required a lot of food and effort, and it took a lot of effort to tame it. Moreover, not every dwarf family had the ability to tame a subterranean beast. Raising a subterranean beast required an astonishing amount of food. It wasn't something an ordinary dwarf family could afford. Although Rock had some status in the tribe, he only had 2 subterranean beasts under his name. If one of them were to be slaughtered here because of Shea's words, it would really make the dwarves' hearts bleed. Seeing the human warrior slash down with his machete covered in do-chi, Rock subconsciously closed his eyes. Bang! After a muffled sound, the subterranean beast suddenly raised its head and roared. Its roar was like that of an ox, but it was much louder. Moreover, this roar contained the taste of pain. When Rock opened his eyes, he thought he'd see blood splattered all over the ground, but he was stunned. His subterranean beast had only been beaten to the ground. There was a mark on the left side of its back. Clearly, the warrior's attack had taken a toll on it. But that was it. There was no sign of blood or injury. I used the back of my machete. Our Lord General is benevolent. How could he really kill your beast? Hawk walked over and patted Rock's shoulder. He smiled and put away his machete, then turned to look at Shea. "My lord, this thing really isn't bad. Although I used the back of my machete, I used 50% of my strength. It probably broke a bone, but it's not that serious. With such thick skin, as expected of a magical beast. Magical beasts are magical beasts. Even if they're tamed, they're still magical beasts, not ordinary livestock." Rock relaxed at first, but then he looked at the place where his subterranean beast's bones had been broken. His heart ached once more. Shea laughed out loud and went over to pull the rock. "I'm sorry, my dwarf brother. It's not that I want to hurt your animal, but if I don't use my real strength to try, how can I test its quality? There's no room for hypocrisy on the battlefield. As for now, I'm very satisfied with the result." A mid-ranked warrior had used 50% of his strength and even added his fighting aura. Although he'd used the back of his machete, he still hadn't been able to kill this thing. It seemed that this thing's ability to take hits was extraordinary. Moreover, the subterranean beast's ability to carry weight was outstanding. It could carry a few thousand kilograms without a hitch. Such a sturdy and powerful creature with such a large and majestic body, if it was covered in tough armor and thrown into the battlefield, it would be able to run amok. Shea's eyes began to shine. The country bumpkin began to imagine a scene on the battlefield, a fully armored subterranean beast charging into the enemy's rank. The surrounding enemy soldiers all raised their swords, but all they could do was make clanking sounds against the subterranean beast's armor. They couldn't stop this immensely powerful creature from continuing its rampage, throwing men and horses off their feet. The subterranean beast's speed wasn't fast enough. That was its flaw. But what if I didn't use it as a cavalry mount, but were they going to be used as foot soldiers? Imagine a team of fully armored subterranean beasts charging at the very front. Even if the enemy was a formation of heavy infantry, they probably wouldn't be able to stop such a charging team, right? As for archers, against these magical beasts that couldn't be hurt by swords and sabers, they wouldn't even be able to scratch an itch. If he had such a vanguard, there wouldn't be too many of them. On the battlefield, they would be responsible for breaking through the enemy's rank. If they could break through a gap in the enemy's ranks, then they could play a decisive role. The more Shea thought about it, the more tempted he became. In the end, he even wanted to slap himself. I'm such a pig. Why didn't I think of using such a good thing earlier? The relationship between humans and dwarves had always been very stiff. Apart from a very small number of caravans that could gain the dwarves' limited trust and make some small transactions with them, the entire human world was unable to cooperate with the dwarves on a large scale in other fields. As for the subterranean beasts that the dwarves had tamed, they had never sold them to any caravans. The dwarves didn't trust humans, and even viewed them as enemies. This situation had never really improved. If it weren't for the existence of a powerful backer like Merlin, these proud dwarves wouldn't even look at him. Shea took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement in his heart. He put on a calm expression and looked at Boulder. Not bad, I'm satisfied with this result. Now, Boulder, let's discuss this. Can you sell these subterranean beasts to me? Wait. Boulder suddenly seemed to sense that something was wrong. You said these? Great Thunder God! Honorable General, did I hear wrongly? Don't you only need a temporary mount for yourself? Shea smiled slyly. Don't forget, I'm a noble, and we nobles have habits. All right, Sir General. We dwarves are simple and honest, but we're not fools. After all, Boulder still had brains. After thinking for a moment, he smiled. It looks like you're tempted by the subterranean beasts that we've tamed. Do you want to use these beasts on the battlefield? Shea chuckled. He didn't feel embarrassed that his intentions had been seen through. He simply said, That's right, that's exactly what I'm thinking. These beasts are quite useful to me. Let's get straight to the point, my dwarf brother. What do you want in exchange for selling some subterranean beasts to me? Shea quickly calculated in his mind. These dwarves had brought about 100 subterranean beasts with them. If he could eat all of them, it would be enough to form a single assault camp. So what if they were slow? No matter how slow the subterranean beasts were, they were still as fast as a normal person. They could be used as infantry in an assault camp. In a field battle, no heavy-armored infantry would be able to stop a group of these beasts. A shield wall? Could it stop the enormous strength of the subterranean beasts? Could spearmen pierce the tough skin of the subterranean beasts? What's more, he was prepared to give these things a layer of hard and thick armor. As for archers, to the subterranean beasts, they were nothing but floating clouds, as far as he could remember. Among the weapons in the human army, perhaps only the heavy hammers of high-level warriors could cause damage to the subterranean beasts in close combat. Ordinary soldiers could ignore them. Is there anything else? Well, ballistae can also kill subterranean beasts, but they're usually used as defensive fortifications on city walls. Although they're powerful, they're not very accurate. They can only deal damage by covering a large area. Good stuff. Absolutely good stuff. Why didn't the human merchants who traded with the dwarves think of buying such good stuff? What a waste! Honorable General, I must tell you that I have no authority to sell these subterranean beasts to you. Boulder's reply sent a chill down Shea's spine. We dwarves are different from you humans. These subterranean beasts are the private property of every dwarven family. Even our King Greybeard can only use dwarven warriors when he needs them. He doesn't have the authority to sell them. The ownership of these subterranean beasts belongs to their respective masters. So that's how it is. Shea heaved a sigh of relief. That's easy. Lao Tzu could send people to each of the dwarves to negotiate with them. In addition, subterranean beasts are an important source of production for dwarves. We dwarves are good at mining and forging iron tools, but to carry large amounts of heavy ores out of the mine, I'm afraid even the strongest dwarf wouldn't be able to bear that kind of physical labor. Subterranean beasts are our greatest help. I'm afraid that very few dwarves are willing to sell their subterranean beasts. Once they do, although they'll benefit temporarily, they'll lose their greatest source of labor and their future source of income. Shea frowned when he heard this, but he wasn't discouraged. Subterranean beasts were important to the dwarves, but he could just ask for a higher price. Dwarves have never been willing to trade with humans. We don't trust them. Oh, I hope you don't mind me saying this, General. Rockhead explained. Although there are some human caravans that come to trade with us, these transactions are controlled at the tribal level. In other words, when these human caravans trade with our dwarf tribe will gather the goods and prepare them. Then we'll trade with the human caravans in the name of our tribe. However, individual dwarven families are unwilling to trade with human merchants. No wonder human caravans couldn't buy subterranean beasts. Human caravans would trade with the tribe leaders, but the tribe leaders didn't have the authority to sell subterranean beasts, because they were the dwarves' private property. And individual dwarves refused to trade with human merchants. These dwarves were really too stubborn. I must explain to you that you've only seen the advantages of these subterranean beasts. You haven't seen their flaws, Boulder kindly reminded him. Are you talking about their running speed? I don't think that's a problem. I have my own ways. Shea smiled, but he appreciated Boulder's kindness. No. Running speed isn't a big problem. Although I'm stupid, I can roughly understand that you don't need these subterranean beasts as mounts for cavalry. What I want to talk about is their other flaws. Boulder sighed. First of all, these things, they eat a lot. Because of this, taming subterranean beasts is a very expensive matter for dwarves. Ordinary dwarven families don't have that much spare food to tame them. In our dwarven tribes, only the wealthy dwarven families have the ability to tame subterranean beasts. These subterranean beasts consume an astonishing amount of food. Oh? How much? Boulder muttered to himself for a moment, then gave him a number. As soon as he heard this number, Shea's expression changed. However, Shea's expression quickly returned to normal. Consume a lot of food? What was there to be afraid of? Lao Tzu's territories were all the largest grain-producing areas in the north of Byzantium. Would a restaurant owner be afraid of a glutton? What a joke! Moreover, although the number Boulder gave was a little too much, it also depended on how one analyzed it. If these subterranean beasts were used well, their combat power would definitely surpass 3 battalions of heavy infantry, and their ability to attack fortifications was comparable to an emblem regiment of heavy infantry. Heavy infantry was the most expensive troop type in the human army, second only to cavalry. A fully armored infantry troop would require a huge amount of money, be it in terms of the selection of soldiers, salaries, or equipment. A single subterranean beast battalion was comparable to an emblem regiment of heavy infantry. Even if they consumed more food, it couldn't possibly be more than feeding an emblem regiment of heavy infantry. Food, Lao Tzu has plenty of food. My territory is a grain-producing area, so this isn't a problem for me. Shea shook his head. Anything else? Boulder sighed. He was really envious of Shea's extravagance. The dwarves had always been bad at farming, and food was a necessity for them. Although the dwarves were hostile to humans, they had no choice but to maintain trade and relations with some human merchant group. If the dwarves wanted to expand, food was their biggest constraint. The dwarves were good at mining and smithing, but they weren't good at farming. Farming wasn't a talent of the dwarves. However, if the dwarves wanted to expand, they had to dig bigger mines. To dig bigger mines, they needed more subterranean beasts. To tame more subterranean beasts, they needed more food. Food was the biggest shackle that restricted the development of the dwarf clan. For this reason, the dwarves had no choice but to trade with human merchant groups. They even used the valuable minerals in their own tribes to exchange for the high-priced food brought by the human merchant groups. The human merchant groups were very black-hearted. If the same food was sold to the dwarves, the price would be at least 10 times higher than the price in the Byzantine Empire. As for the ores dug out by the dwarves, and even the ironware made by the dwarves, they could bring them back to the country and sell them for 100 times the price of what they bought. This was one of the main reasons why the dwarves didn't trust humans. Food. The dwarves dreamed of getting a large amount of food. The dwarves liked to drink, but due to the shortage of food, they didn't have much food to make wine. Everyone in the caravan knew that even the most common liquor in the human world could be traded for a dwarf's silver coin with a barrel of inferior rye wine. This price was 20 times that of the human world. Food was so expensive in their own land, but this human general could squander it as he wished. Boulder sighed with emotion. All right, if food isn't a problem, then there's another problem. These subterranean beasts live in caves. In other words, they hibernate every winter for at least 2 to 3 months. They can't do any work. Shea was dumbfounded. They couldn't use them in winter? But who could say for sure when it came to war? Even if Shea could control the subterranean beasts from attacking his enemies during winter, he couldn't guarantee that his enemies wouldn't attack him during winter. Do they have to sleep during winter? Is there really no other way? Shea frowned. It's not impossible to control them by force. Boulder scratched his head. Well, if we force the subterranean beasts to work during the winter, they'll be listless and lazy. Furthermore, if we force them to work during the winter, they'll consume a lot more food than usual. That's why we dwarves never do that. Food. Then there's no problem, Shea nodded. They'll be less useful during winter. I'll remember that. Anything else? No. Boulder smiled. If all that I've said isn't a problem for you, then I can tell you that these subterranean beasts will be the most outstanding labor force you've ever seen. Their ability to carry heavy loads was extremely strong, and they could still work in harsh environments. They can go 3 days without drinking water and are very obedient. They'll obey their master's orders and are very loyal to their masters. All right. Now it's time to name your price. Shea waved the horsewhip in his hand. I've said it before. These subterranean beasts are private property. I can't name a price for them. You'll have to talk to them yourself. I must warn you that we dwarves are very stubborn. We don't trust humans, so most dwarves aren't willing to trade with them. So, what if I use food in exchange? Shea chuckled. That might be possible, but, Great General, selling 1 or 2 to you isn't a problem. But if you need a lot, I'm afraid that won't be possible. King Greybeard's laws state that subterranean beasts are important property of the dwarves. They can't be traded with humans. You are a friend of us dwarves. If you want a few, or even a dozen, I think that we dwarves have lived here for so many days and have received your hospitality. Perhaps someone would be willing to sell it to you. But if you want to buy more, even if we are willing, the Dwarven Code will not allow it. Damn, this is really a headache. Shea's eyes flashed with light. Clearly, this bumpkin was starting to think of something. After a while, Shea suddenly looked at Boulder and spoke in his most sincere tone. Brother Boulder, can you do me a favor? Rockhead smiled and said, "Why don't you tell me what it is? It's not too difficult. I just need you to make a trip. I want you to go back to your tribe and pass on a few words to King Greybeard. At the same time, tell him some of my suggestions." Boulder blinked. Suggestions? Yes. Shea cleared his throat and said, "Remember my words. I, General of the Byzantine Empire's northern garrison region, Duke Naz of the Byzantine Empire, Duke Thunder of Shea, greet the great King Greybeard, and may the god of thunder bless you. As the general of the northern garrison of the Byzantine Empire, my territory has 4 prefectures, millions of people, and tens of thousands of soldiers. I'm willing to sincerely cooperate with the dwarf King Greybeard's tribe. I know the dwarven brothers need food, and my territory is the largest food-producing region in the Byzantine Empire. To express my goodwill, I propose that we trade some food in the future. As for the price, I think it'll fluctuate between this number." Shea muttered to himself for a moment before giving a number. This price was already twice the price of food in the Byzantine Empire. When Boulder heard this number, he was immediately dumbfounded. Not waiting for Shea to finish speaking, Rockman had already firmly grasped Shea. "Sir General, what you said is true. Is it true?" "Of course it's true. Lao Tzu, General of the Northern Garrison. Here, my words are the highest law." Boulder almost fainted from happiness on the spot. Shea began to feel depressed. From Boulder's reaction, the country bumpkin suddenly realized that his price was too low. He couldn't help but ask, "What's the price of the human caravan that's currently trading with your tribe?" It had to be said that the dwarf was very honest after all. He answered sincerely, "Add a 0 to the number you reported. I % yen %. Shea cursed fiercely. He was cursing the black-hearted human caravans. He was cursing himself even more. The country bumpkin was so regretful that he wanted to slap himself a few times. Why was he in such a hurry to give a price? If he had known earlier, as long as his price was just a little lower than those black-hearted human merchants, these dwarves might have begged him to make a deal. However, a country bumpkin was still a country bumpkin. The cunning him immediately thought of a way to make up for it. "The price I gave doesn't include the freight. In other words, if you want to make a deal at this price, you dwarves have to bring your own team to my territory to buy. I'm not responsible for delivering the goods." Shea very righteously added an explanation. He thought to himself, "At least I can save some freight. Although I don't have the authority to promise you, in my judgment, there's no problem at all." Boulder wanted to kiss Shea fiercely. The dwarf sincerely said in a loud voice, "General Shea, you will be the best and closest friend of our Greybeard tribe." Shea immediately took a step back to prevent this guy from really hugging him. It must be known that these dwarves didn't have the habit of bathing. "However, aren't you forgetting something?" Boulder suddenly looked somewhat worried. "I heard that your country seems to have a law that doesn't allow you to sell food to us dwarves. The emperor of your country has decreed that you are not allowed to trade food with us dwarves. And those caravans are also secret caravans sent by some of your country's great nobles to carry out some secret small-scale transactions with us. But your identity is different. You are an official. If you openly carry out such a direct official transaction with us as a local official, aren't you afraid that the emperor of your country will punish you? Or the sanctions of your country's law?" Shea directly rolled his eyes. The country bumpkin arrogantly replied, "Law? In Lao Tzu's territory, Lao Tzu is the law." Boulder was still very worried. "But the emperor of your country has made a strict imperial decree. You are just a general, a duke. After all, you are not as big as the emperor. Aren't you afraid that the emperor will?" Shea didn't even bother to roll his eyes this time. His tone was very disdainful. "Emperor? TSK, what is that? Is there such a thing in the world?" If you want to know what happens next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.